Hello, my dear friend of sleepy history. The night has fallen gently. It's time for you to lay down your worries and burdens outside the door, because this moment is yours, yours alone. And Earth, ancient and patient, is waiting to whisper her story. A barren planet once drifting through the void, where silence reigned as ice gripped the oceans for millions of years, then gave way to the furious breath of molten magma, where the seas once brimmed with death, only to stir again like the very first breath of the cosmos. And yet, Mother Earth healed, with patience, with stillness, with the quiet beauty of rebirth. Tonight, I invite you to journey with me to a very special time, the Cambrian period, when life first found its voice. Deep within the ancient seas, a voice, soft and wordless, yet strong enough to stir the deep, a turning point that transformed Earth from stillness to the symphony of life. Now take a guess at which minute of tonight's story you'll drift into sleep. Feel free to leave a little note in the comments below. We'll smile together and wish each other a gentle good night. Breathe slowly, close your eyes, and may your dreams be cradled in the ancient oceans of the Cambrian. Part 1. The Cambrian Explosion of Life. 1. The Causes of the Cambrian Explosion. A whisper before awakening. Long, long ago, so far back that even the ancient stars had forgotten, Earth lay silent. The world slumbered beneath gentle waves, wrapped in a mist of ancient oceans and endless quiet. Time did not pass by minutes or days, but by the slow shifting of stone and the delicate layering of sediment over millions upon millions of years. And then, something stirred. In the hush, a breath. In the dark, a faint shimmer. In the depths of still, ancient waters, life began to stretch, reaching for something new in a way no one could have foreseen. It was the Cambrian explosion, a moment unlike any other, a sudden symphony of life, blooming across the planet's oceans in waves of color, shape, and movement. But why then? Why there? What forces aligned to make this extraordinary burst of evolution possible? Tonight, dear traveler of time, let us drift gently back to that forgotten dawn and follow the threads of cause and chance that set in motion one of the greatest miracles in Earth's long history. A rising breath of oxygen, nature's silent gift. Everything began with the air, or rather, with the invisible changes happening in the ancient seas and skies, where tiny, unseen organisms worked tirelessly for billions of years. Cyanobacteria, humble architects of life, quietly exhaled oxygen through photosynthesis. Generation after generation, their breath filled the oceans, then slowly seeped into the sky, molecule by molecule. Before this, Earth had been suffocating. Oxygen was scarce, a faint whisper lost amidst storms of volcanic gas and murky, anoxic seas. Most life clung to simple forms, soft-bodied, fragile, microscopic organisms drifting in shallow pools, surviving on sunlight and minerals. But over time, oxygen levels quietly rose, patiently, persistently, until one day, like a tide finally cresting after an eternity of stillness, it surged. The great oxygenation flooded the seas and air with opportunity. Oxygen isn't just a gas. It's the spark of potential. It allows cells to burn fuel more efficiently, enabling organisms to grow larger, move faster, and build intricate systems. Muscles that contract, nerves that pulse, eyes that see. Without it, complex life would forever remain a dream, confined to the shallows of possibility. In those rising breaths of ancient bacteria, the foundation of the Cambrian miracle was quietly laid. And by the dawn of this new era, Earth took a long, steady inhale and life awoke. Calm between storms, the gift of a stable climate. For most of Earth's early history, chaos ruled. The planet lurched between suffocating ice ages and searing volcanic heat. Glaciers smothered the land in sheets of cold silence, only to be chased away by rivers of molten rock. Meteorites scarred the surface. Oceans boiled and froze in endless cycles. In this unforgiving theater, life survived in brief, desperate episodes, hiding in sheltered corners whenever nature's fury returned. But in the early Cambrian, something remarkable happened. The climate settled, temperatures warmed, glaciers receded, warm, shallow seas spread across the young continents. The sun's light, once too cruel or too faint, now embraced the planet in gentle equilibrium. Not too hot, not too cold. For the first time in eons, Earth granted life a rare and precious gift. Time. Time to adapt. Time to experiment. Time to explore new shapes, new behaviors, and new possibilities. In that rare stillness, nature began composing its masterpiece. A world of warm seas, abundant nutrients, and quiet, stable weather formed the cradle for life's next great adventure. The secret within breakthroughs in genetic blueprint. Yet oxygen and climate alone were not enough to summon the Cambrian's dazzling bloom. The third force lay hidden within life itself, in the delicate language of DNA. Genes, those quiet scribes of memory and form, had been mutating, rearranging, and refining themselves for billions of years. Not in sudden chaos, but in an elegant, deliberate whisper. Somewhere deep in the genetic libraries of ancient microbes, new tools began to emerge. Regulatory genes, master switches capable of commanding entire body parts to form. Among them, a crucial family appeared, Hox genes. If the organism was a growing city, Hox genes were its architects and urban planners. They quietly dictated, "You will become the head. You will grow limbs here. You remain the tail. You divide." For the first time, bodies developed symmetry and intentional form. There was now a head and a tail, a top and a bottom. Organisms could build eyes, mouths, spines, and limbs, structures with function and purpose. And with form came motion. With motion came hunting. With hunting came defense. Defense demanded armor, shells, and sharp spines. Every ripple of adaptation sent waves through the ecosystem, birthing new predators, prey, and behaviors. From a silent genetic shift came the first beating rhythm of ecological interaction. The ancient seas had awoken, not with noise, but with movement, when everything aligned, a perfect harmony. Each factor, the surge of oxygen, the calm of the climate, the precision of new genetic tools, held its own quiet power. But when they appeared together in the same era, in the same place, their combined momentum was unstoppable. It was as if Earth had been holding its breath for billions of years, waiting for this perfect moment to exhale. In a span of a few million years, a geological blink of an eye, life diversified at a pace the planet had never known. Organisms with shells, creatures with primitive eyes, swimmers, burrowers, grazers, and hunters. Shapes and structures that had never existed before. Some would vanish quickly, while others would leave behind fossils that still whisper their stories today. This wasn't a single explosion of sound or flame. It was an explosion of potential, a gentle, inevitable unfolding of nature's possibilities. And from that quiet cascade, the entire animal kingdom, and eventually us, would emerge. A moment to breathe. Now, dear soul, As you lay your head upon the pillow and let the night's gentle hush gather around you, imagine this: a world that had waited in silence for eons, suddenly blooming in color and motion. A long dormant earth, exhaling after an eternity of holding its breath. The Cambrian explosion did not arrive like a storm crashing upon the shore. It arrived like the first spring breeze after a brutal winter, like a child's first breath, like the hush before a song. Earth had waited long enough, and now she was ready to sing. To the first creatures with hard parts, a world beginning to take shape. Long before the world knew sharp teeth, polished shells, or towering coral reefs, life was formless, tender, soft, and drifting. The ancient oceans shimmered with translucent bodies, so fragile they vanished with the touch of a current. Life then was a gentle breath, a fleeting pulse in the dark. Creatures existed as whispers upon the tides, barely leaving a trace of their passing. But nature, even in its gentlest moments, yearns to hold on. And so it began, not with thunder or flame, but with grains of stone, gathered slowly by tiny hands of nature, shaping the first thin boundaries between the vulnerable and the wild. It wasn't ambition. It wasn't conquest. It was simply the instinct to remain. And from this quiet need, the first hard parts were born. The birth of the first shell's gentle defenses. First, it was a modest change. Some minute organisms, floating in the shallow warmth of ancient seas, began pulling minerals from the water around them. Grains of calcium carbonate and calcium phosphate gathered like morning dew upon a leaf, forming delicate shells and thin protective plates. Not thick shields, not jagged weapons, but tender veils between soft flesh and a restless, shifting world. Why did this happen? It wasn't strategy or aggression, it was survival. Even the gentlest barrier could soften the push of drifting sediment, shield against the salt-heavy waves, and ease the pressure of deepening tides. In a world in constant motion, a slender shell was enough to offer a single precious thing, a chance to endure. And for life, a chance was everything. The quiet chemistry of life's new tools. Beneath these fragile bodies, a silent revolution stirred. Inside their cells, genetic whispers gave rise to remarkable new tools. Proteins like chitin and silicate-binding enzymes began crafting the first mineral lattices. Simple sequences in their DNA, including early ancestors of homeobox, HOX, genes, carefully instructed where minerals should collect, how to shape them, and what form a body might take. For the first time, life was not only surviving, but sculpting itself. Shells thickened, tiny spines emerged, intricate patterns spread across surfaces like ripples in sand. Each creature inherited new instructions, a blueprint to carry strength within beauty and beauty within resilience. This wasn't chaos. It was nature's first careful sketch of form and function. The arms race of form and function. But with hard parts came new challenges. Where once the ocean held simple, open chains of life, microbe consuming microbe, soft-bodied scavengers grazing upon organic films, now arose creatures that could resist, dig, burrow, and hunt. A thin shell inspired the invention of drills. A hardened plate called forth crushing jaws. A spine demanded a countermeasure. It marked the dawn of the first biological arms race. For every creature that forged a barrier, another would evolve a way to overcome it. For each predator's new weapon, prey responded with cunning, speed, or camouflage. Some creatures buried themselves deeper in the seabed. Others anchored to rock, becoming immovable fortresses. Some adorned themselves with spines and sharp ridges, and predators followed with claws, mandibles, and sinuous, agile bodies. This wasn't hatred, it was necessity, a delicate, unending dance of invention and response. The web of Cambrian ecosystems, the ripple of hard-shelled life spread beyond individual creatures. It reshaped entire ecosystems. New ways of feeding emerged. Grazers scraped algae from stone. Scavengers picked apart broken shells. Predators stalked, and scavengers followed. Burrowers churned the seafloor, mixing sediment and bringing oxygen into deeper layers. Nutrient cycles quickened. Every tiny armored creature's movement reshaped the sands. Simple reefs formed, not the towering coral cities of future ages, but clusters of shelled animals and primitive sponges, bustling, growing, and sheltering thousands of others. The food webs deepened. Links multiplied. Every creature, no matter how small, found its place in the ancient web. Fossils, silent witnesses to an ancient symphony. Perhaps the most lasting gift of these hard parts was their ability to endure. Soft-bodied beings left little trace, but shells, exoskeletons, and bones, those remained. Fossils became the first diary of Earth, written in limestone and shale, recorded in the language of mineral and silt. Through them, we glimpse ancient climates, vanished oceans, extinctions and rebirths, and the relentless march of evolution. Each fossil, no matter how tiny, whispers a tender truth. I lived, I struggled, I survived, and now I tell my story, a reflection carried by the tide. And tonight, as you listen, let your thoughts wander, not to the loud moments of history, but to this quiet chapter, a time when the simple act of gathering grains of stone was an act of resilience. Those early shells stirred the sands, shaped the seafloor, and gave rise to something greater, the first true communities of life. In the world's earliest reefs and gentle underwater plains, creatures gathered, fed, sheltered, and learned to coexist. And this is where we'll follow next, to the birth of Earth's earliest ecosystems, where each tiny life, armored in fragile brilliance, played its part in weaving the first great tapestry of nature. Let your mind drift there now. The story continues just beyond the tide. 3. The earliest Cambrian ecosystems, a world woven by gentle motion. Close your eyes for a moment, dear traveler of distant ages, and imagine an ancient ocean, not silent, but filled with the soft murmurs of settling silt and the quiet pulse of invisible currents. Above, the sky remained a tender, muted blue, while below lay a world with no forests or flowers, yet teeming with subtle promises. This was Earth at the dawn of complex ecosystems, a cradle where threads of life gently intertwined, each one connected by instinct, chemistry, and inevitability. Before the Cambrian, life clung to simple forms. Cyanobacteria and microbial mats stretched across the shallow seafloor, like tiny living carpets basking in dim sunlight. But with the emergence of hard-bodied creatures, the world beneath those waters transformed, not with violence, but with the tender rise of possibility, like a ripple stirring a midnight tide. Earth was learning to heal, not through abrupt revolution, but through subtle, enduring changes. The birth of primal reef communities. It began in shallow waters, where light kissed the seafloor and minerals abounded. Simple sponges anchored themselves to rock and firm sediment, their porous bodies quietly filtering nutrients from passing currents. Around them, early shelled creatures gathered, their shimmering forms scattered like ancient pearls across the seabed. These were the first reefs, not the towering coral cities of later ages, but modest mosaics of stone and life. Primitive bivalves, early brachiopods and archaeocyathids, extinct sponge-like creatures, built structures that slowed water flow, trapped organic fragments, and offered sanctuary from roaming predators. These gentle, collaborative architectures reshaped the seafloor. Currents weaving through these fragile reefs oxygenated deeper sediments, nourishing hidden microbial communities. Nutrient cycles quickened, and within these oases, life diversified. Earth, after eons of stillness, was gently stitching new patterns into its living fabric. Every reef became a gathering place. Tiny grazers nibbled microbial films. Filter feeders plucked drifting particles. Scavengers waited for fallen scraps. Above the shimmering surface, the ocean appeared calm, but beneath, thousands of quiet stories unfolded, each life brushing against another, weaving an intricate web. The rise of burrowers and subtle architects. As ecosystems grew denser, some creatures sought shelter within the seafloor itself. Primitive worm-like animals began to burrow, stirring up sediments that had lain undisturbed for eons. These tiny tunnels allowed oxygen to penetrate deeper into the muddy earth. A seemingly simple act, yet one that sparked profound change. Microbial mats, once flat and unbroken, now fragmented. Nutrients locked within ancient silt were released. New ecological niches opened for creatures ready to thrive in this freshly turned world. Burrowers created a three-dimensional habitat where once there was only a blank canvas. Predator-prey dynamics shifted. Some creatures adapted to life within the sediment, while others evolved ways to sense movement beneath the seafloor. The Cambrian benthic realm, life above and within the seafloor, became one of Earth's earliest and most significant ecological innovations. In this, the planet was healing itself, mending the flat, barren seabed into layered sanctuaries. It was a tender resilience, not abrupt, but patient, continuous. Food webs and new ecological roles. With grazers, burrowers, and filter feeders, ancient food chains deepened and gained complexity. Once, energy passed mainly between single-celled organisms, cyanobacteria, algae, and tiny consumers. Now, it flowed through layered, branching webs. Filter feeders gathered suspended particles. Small predators like trilobites hunted them. Larger predators chased the hunters. Scavengers lingered behind. Even broken shells and discarded exoskeletons became part of this living network, offering shelter to microbes and tiny creatures. The Cambrian seafloor no longer served as a passive backdrop but became a living participant, its every ripple and disturbance shaping the biosphere above. Earth's quiet resilience showed itself here, too. Ecosystems evolving not to dominate, but to coexist and sustain. Symbiosis, rivalry, and the art of coexistence. Within this tapestry of life, relationships deepened. Some species forged gentle alliances. Sponges sheltered filter feeders in their hollow bodies. Burrowing worms created passageways for other animals seeking food. At the same time, competition sharpened. Space on reefs was precious. Creatures jostled for positions where nutrient-rich currents flowed strongest. Predators honed their strategies, driving prey to evolve sturdier shells and swifter movement. This fragile balance between collaboration and conflict drove evolution itself. Cambrian changes never occurred in isolation. Every innovation was a quiet reply to the world around it, a patient, unspoken dialogue echoing through countless generations. And in this, life reflected Earth's enduring lesson. Healing and progress emerge not from conquest, but from tender adjustments, patient resilience, and the interplay of many gentle forces. Fossils, nature's whispered records. Today, we rediscover this lost world through the fossils it left behind. Burgess Shale in Canada, Changjiang in China, and other Cambrian fossil sites preserve extraordinary details of these ancient ecosystems. Delicate, soft-bodied creatures, rare in fossil records, appear here with astonishing clarity. Trilobites with articulated legs, ethereal jellyfish-like forms, spiny predators. Trace fossils of ancient burrows and reefs reveal community life, the restless sculpting of the seafloor, and the delicate equilibrium of survival. Each fossil tells not just its own story, but whispers of the countless invisible threads that once connected it to a world teeming with gentle determination. Earth's timeless resilience. And here lies a tender lesson for us, not spoken in grand declarations, but in the steady pulse of nature's memory. Earth did not arrive at its intricate beauty through sudden victories, but through billions of patient adjustments, gentle adaptations, and quiet resilience. A tunnel in the mud, a shell on a reef, a shift in feeding habits. Each thread strengthened the web of life, ensuring it would endure not by erasing challenge, but by bending and reshaping. We, too, in restless nights and anxious dawns, might remember this. Like those Cambrian creatures who stitched fragile defenses and built small shelters in uncertain seas, we are made to persist, not through grand, unyielding armor, but through soft strength. A kind word, a moment of calm, a breath taken in quiet resolve. The ancient seas remind us that life's beauty lies in the subtle, persistent art of mending, balancing, and continuing, a gentle drift toward what's next. As the night deepens, picture the Cambrian Ocean murmuring with invisible life, each gentle current subtly redrawing the world below. Fragile shells glint beneath soft light, burrowed tunnels lace through ancient silt. Silent hunters pass like shadows, and within this vibrant tapestry, a new form begins to emerge, the trilobite. In the next part of our journey, we will follow this armored sovereign of Cambrian seas, with its segmented body, crystalline eyes, and fossilized legacy, and learn how it shaped the world in bold and delicate ways alike. Close your eyes now, traveler, and let the tides of that ancient sea carry you onward. Part 2. Crustaceans, Shellfish. 1. Trilobite, the lords of the Cambrian Sea. A new shape in the water. Close your eyes and let the waves of deep time carry you backward. Imagine a Cambrian sea, pale and flickering, filled with the quiet stirrings of life learning to be bold. Here, in the dappled shallows and silted plains, a new creature begins its long journey through history, not with a roar, but with a shimmer beneath the waves. This is the trilobite, neither predator nor prey in the conventional sense. The trilobite entered Earth's symphony not as a conqueror, but as a careful participant. Its segmented body, gently armored in calcified plates, moved with purpose across ancient seabeds. Its crystalline compound eyes glittered like the earliest stars of the biological world, marking a pivotal transition, from sensing touch to sensing light, from reacting to perceiving. These beings were small, no larger than a human hand, yet they came to embody a timeless truth, that significance isn't always about scale, but about presence. In the relentless tide of the Cambrian explosion, trilobites offered not spectacle, but steadiness. Not dominance, but adaptation. The armor and the eye, a dance of protection and perception to survive in the wild and changing seas. Trilobites wore their safety as skin, Their hard exoskeletons, segmented like ancient manuscripts, told the tale of careful evolution. These were not shells for war, but homes of stability. Each played a promise to endure, to resist the currents, to face the unknown. But even more wondrous were their eyes, nature's first crystals of vision. Composed of calcite, they captured light from murky depths and shifting skies. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of tiny lenses joined together, giving these creatures a mosaic view of their world. With this gift, trilobites saw threats before they touched, light before it scattered, and movement long before it arrived. And so, a new kind of living began, one based not just on reaction but on awareness. Even in our modern lives, surrounded by noise and urgency, there is something deeply healing in remembering this ancient principle. To see clearly, to pause, to sense the world before acting. The trilobite reminds us that vision, in both body and spirit, is a form of safety. Ways of life, crawlers, burrowers, and ocean dancers, trilobites did not settle into one role. They bloomed into many. Some crept slowly along microbial mats, brushing gently against the sea floor like quiet caretakers. Others burrowed into the sediment, their bodies aerating the earth, making way for the oxygen that unseen creatures needed to thrive. Still others took to swimming, their jointed limbs paddling in synchronized ease. Whether navigating currents or tucking into crevices, trilobites moved with grace, never in haste, always in tune with the world around them. There is gentleness in this diversity, a lesson in flexibility and care. In the relentless pace of modern life, we often seek one answer, one role, one identity. But trilobites teach a softer truth, that it is okay to change, to try, to fit into many patterns before finding your rhythm. Enduring without domination, the long patience of survival, what is the measure of strength? For trilobites, it was never force, it was time. From the early Cambrian to the end of the Permian, trilobites thrived for more than 270 million years. They lived through shifting climates, rising seas, emerging predators, and tectonic upheavals. Yet they did not outpace these changes. They adapted to them slowly, mindfully, through gentle change. Some developed stronger shells. Others refined their eyes or limbs. None evolved overnight. Instead, they trusted the slow magic of small improvements passed down through generations. And in this, we find a quiet metaphor for healing. In our rushed world, where solutions are demanded in days and transformation expected in weeks, the trilobite story offers balm. You do not need to change everything at once. Soft steps, repeated with intention, can shape a life as surely as they shaped an era. Infinite forms most beautiful, the celebration of diversity, the fossil record sings of trilobite variety. Over 20,000 species have been identified, each an experiment in design. Some bore long spines, others flattened themselves like living shadows. Some grew elaborate crests, possibly for mating displays, while others remained simple and efficient. From tiny, fingernail-sized wanderers to nearly half-meter giants, trilobites filled ecological niches like threads weaving a complex tapestry. And with each form, nature declared again and again, difference is not a weakness, but a wonder. Their diverse existence invites us to reflect. How often do we shrink from our uniqueness, afraid it won't fit? The trilobites teach otherwise. Their many shapes were not errors, but songs of survival. In them, we glimpse the sacred strength of individuality expressed in harmony with the whole. Fossils of presence, leaving something behind even now, the trilobite speaks. From limestone cliffs and desert floors, Their fossils rise like memories pressed into stone. Coiled in death poses or stretched in ancient stride, they whisper not of tragedy, but of legacy. Their hardened shells became homes for others. Their burrows enriched seafloors. Even in silence, they served. These traces remind us, we do not need to make noise to leave a mark. Kindness, patience, the willingness to stay. These too become fossils in the lives we touch. So when your own world feels loud and uncertain, remember the trilobite's grace. It was never the loudest, never the fastest, yet it endured. And in that endurance, it helped shape a planet. A step toward the next symphony. As the Cambrian seas deepened, new shapes followed Trilobite's trail. Creatures of daring form, sharper instinct, and stunning adaptation would soon emerge. But they would owe part of their strength to these armored trailblazers, the ones who first learned to see, to shield, and to stay. And so we turn the page not away from trilobites, but because of them. In our next chapter, the sea swells with even stranger beings. Velvet-bodied swimmers, shell-clad grazers, and the delicate architects of coral-like communities. Stay with the current, dear soul. The story of life is only just unfolding. 2 other Cambrian arthropods. Introduction. In the shadows of the trilobites. Close your eyes, dear soul, and drift once more into the ancient sea. Imagine the soft blue hush of the Cambrian Ocean, teeming, not with noise, but with quiet mystery. In the spaces not claimed by trilobites, other lives shimmered. Delicate, elusive, almost dreamlike. This is their chapter, the forgotten architects of complexity, the gentle dancers of evolution. Let us step lightly through their story. Morella, feathered wanderer of the shale. Among the silt and whispers of the Burgess Shale, Morella walked, or rather, floated. She was no bigger than your thumb, yet within her tiny form was a design so elegant, it endured the weight of 500 million years. Her segmented body curved gently, like the stroke of a calligraphy brush. 2 pairs of antennae graced her head, one long, one short, sensing the sea like fingers brushing silk. Her limbs were fringed with feathery filaments, delicate enough to filter food from the water. She did not rush. She glided, feeding not on conquest but on what the currents offered. Her role was not to dominate, but to keep the sea's breath moving, soft and cyclical. And in Morella's fragility, we find strength. In her drifting dance, we find purpose. She reminds us, there is beauty in being small, and peace in not needing more than enough. Wapsha, guardian of the quiet cradle. Wapsha fildensis, shimmering behind her bivalved shell, swam through the Cambrian waters with intent. She bore 10 pairs of limbs, tools of grace and utility, and large, forward-facing eyes that caught the shifting patterns of light and shadow. But it wasn't her swimming or sight that made her extraordinary. It was her care. Some Wapsha fossils cradle clusters of eggs beneath their shell, suggesting a level of maternal protection astonishingly early in animal history. In this ancient sea of chaos and change, Wapsha became a quiet cradle, a sanctuary in motion. She was not the fastest nor the strongest, but she was present. She carried life not just within, but beside her. She held it close, shielding it not with force, but with devotion. In her, we see the first flicker of something ancient and sacred, the instinct to protect not for gain but for love. Even now, across eons and species, that gesture echoes. A mother holding her child, a shelter in a storm, the quiet vow, I will keep you safe. Wapsha teaches us that motherhood is not measured in words, but in presence. not in perfection but in proximity, that even in the earliest oceans, care had already become a current, flowing gently from body to body, from one life to another. So as we rush through modern life, may we remember her soft lesson: to slow, to carry gently, to guard what matters. Even in prehistory, love, or something near it, may have swum beside us. Isoxes, the drifting sentinel. Imagine a translucent shell, like a curved mirror catching flickers of ancient light. That was Isoxes, with large, bulbous eyes and long spiny extensions. This enigmatic arthropod drifted through mid-water realms, neither bound to the bottom nor dancing at the surface. Its eyes were among the earliest to look outward with intent, not merely to react but to anticipate. Isoxes reminds us of the moment when evolution chose awareness, when seeing became a strategy. We do not fully understand Isoxes' ways. Some believe it was a hunter, using its curved spines to snatch soft prey. Others see it as a filter feeder or passive glider. But maybe its role was not to define, but to observe, to balance the spaces between predators and prey. Like Isoxes, we too sometimes float between labels. Not everything must be named to be known. Its presence whispers to us, even in uncertainty, there is a place. Even in drifting, there is meaning. To Zoya, the armored leaf. At first glance, to Zoya looks like a contradiction. Armored, yet elegant. Its body was wide and leaf-like, with spined edges and a finely textured carapace. It did not swim like a predator nor crawl like a grazer. It hovered, suspended between movement and stillness. To Zoya's spines may have served as a defense, or perhaps as stabilizers in water. Its wide shell could have helped it float or shuffle along the bottom, feeding on detritus, the leftovers of the living. It was a recycler, a soft engineer of the early ecosystem. And yet, to Zoya's design was not loud. The strength was quiet, distributed. Not in attack, but in balance. We often think protection must be sharp, hard, defensive. But to Zoya tells another story. That one can shield without shouting, resist without rigidity. It teaches us the grace of quiet boundaries, and how to carry protection as poise, not armor. Odoraya, the jet-propelled shadow. Odoraya was long and finned, its body streamlined like a submarine built of soft parts. Dozens of legs fluttered beneath it, while a broad tail fin helped it steer and speed through the Cambrian waters. Some call it the first torpedo of life. It was likely a swimmer of the open sea, perhaps hunting smaller prey or scavenging the drifting remains. With eyes on stalks and rows of feathery appendages, Odoraya moved in silence and precision. It was not just built to survive, it was built to explore. What makes Odoraya healing is not its form, but its movement. In it, we see the courage to go farther, the willingness to let go of the seafloor, to enter the midwater where few had yet dared. Sometimes healing asks us to stay, but sometimes, like Odoraya, it asks us to leap, not in haste but in trust. The ocean rewards both stillness and movement. Both belong. A chorus of possibilities, the Cambrian Sea as teacher. Morella, Wapsha, Isoxes, Zoya, Odoraya, each a note in a deeper song. None the same, none complete without the others. Together they composed a balance of roles, of risks, of rhythms. Their diversity was not just decorative. It was essential. They filled niches, shaped sediments, filtered waters, carried life forward. And in their short, ancient lives, they played parts still echoed in ecosystems today. The Cambrian did not favor only the fierce. It favored the fitting, those willing to grow, to sense, to share. In that, these forgotten arthropods speak to us still. You do not have to be the star. You only need to be a part of the song. So as you drift to sleep tonight, remember them, not as fossils, but as breaths. The soft ones, the unseen, the dancers in the quiet. For even the smallest lives can shape the tides. 3. The role of arthropods in the Cambrian food chain. Introduction: weaving the threads of early ecology. As you close your eyes tonight and breathe deeply, imagine yourself adrift in the soft depths of the Cambrian Sea. The water is calm, not silent but full of quiet life. Every pulse, every current carries stories, not of struggle alone, but of balance, exchange, and subtle harmony. In this vast liquid world, tiny creatures worked not alone but together. They wove the earliest food chains, shaping ecosystems that would echo across time. And at the heart of it all were the arthropods. They did not rule by force. They fed, filtered, scurried, and sometimes hunted, each act forming a thread in the web of life. Tonight we follow those threads, not to chase drama, but to understand the gentler truth, that survival, even in its earliest form, was a shared effort. Microbial feeders, cleaning, cycling, and sustaining. Many Cambrian arthropods, especially smaller forms like Morella or early crustacean relatives, fed not on each other, but on the unseen. They grazed on microbial mats, thin, fuzzy layers of bacteria and cyanobacteria that covered the seafloor like underwater meadows. These mats were more than food. They were memory, remnants of the Proterozoic world, still pulsing with photosynthetic rhythm. Arthropods nibbled at them gently, regulating their spread, breaking them down into digestible forms that other creatures could use. In feeding this way, these tiny grazers served as custodians of balance. They prevented microbial overgrowth, released nutrients into the sediment, and cleared space for oxygen flow. It was not glamorous work, but it was essential, the beginning of what would become nature's great cleanup crew. In their soft patterns, we see the first hint of sustainability, that even in feeding, life can be gentle, that even in need, one can nourish without harm. Scavengers and shredders, recycling what was left behind. When something in the Cambrian Sea died, it did not vanish. It became an offering to trilobites, to ice oxys, to early shrimp-like swimmers. These scavengers crept in not as destroyers but as recyclers. They broke down what had once lived, turning it back into usable life. With their jointed legs and mouth parts adapted for shredding, they picked apart soft tissues, consumed decaying matter, and stirred the sediment. Their work was quiet, often invisible, but it kept the ocean floor breathing. Nothing was wasted. This was one of the first ecosystems in which death became food, where every ending fed a beginning. It was not morbid, it was magnificent. The idea that loss could become nourishment, that endings could carry forward into futures. Even now, in our moments of grief, this memory remains. That what feels gone may still feed something new. That beneath the surface, something gentle and regenerative is always at work. The first hunters, awareness, motion, and choice. Not all arthropods fed passively. Some, like Isoxys or Anomalocaris, embraced the role of predators. With advanced eyes and quick reflexes, they moved through the water not just sensing, but choosing. A shift had occurred, from instinctive feeding to selective hunting. These creatures stalked soft-bodied worms or smaller swimmers. They didn't simply consume what drifted their way, they sought it. Their compound eyes, some of the first to truly see, allowed them to detect shadows, motion, and contrast. Their limbs grasped, their jaws adapted. In them, we see not just predation, but the dawn of decision, of intention. And with hunting came change. Prey became faster, more armored, more evasive. Predator and prey began their dance, one that would shape all of animal history. It was not war, it was evolution through challenge. There's healing in that, too. That pressure, when held gently, encourages growth. That even fear can become a teacher. That danger, in doses, draws forth resilience. Webs of interdependence, everything feeds something. The Cambrian food chain was not a line. It was a weave, intricate and recursive. The tiny fed the large. The dead fed the living. Predators ate grazers, but grazers maintained microbial communities, which in turn fueled oxygen cycles and supported all life. Every creature was both giver and taker. Even the hunters became food. Even the feeders cleaned. There was no top, no bottom, only flow. And flow, not hierarchy, was the secret. Arthropods like trilobites and wapsha did not need dominance to thrive. They moved in balance, tuning themselves to the rhythm of the ecosystem. How often we forget that in our striving to climb, we lose sight of the currents we belong to. That true strength comes from knowing your place in the web and honoring it. The Cambrian Sea teaches us this. You are not above, not below, but among. And that is more than enough. Balance through diversity, resilience in many forms. It was the diversity of arthropods that gave the Cambrian food chain its stability. For every grazer, there was a hunter. For every scavenger, a filter feeder. This redundancy, this variety prevented collapse. If one food source failed, another took its place. If one role was vacated, another emerged. The sea adapted not by efficiency alone, but by richness. This is how ecosystems heal, not by stripping down, but by branching out. The arthropods, with their many shapes, diets, and behaviors, ensured no one disaster could bring ruin. They were not parts of a machine. They were members of a living, adapting whole. Diversity was their insurance, and it can be ours. In our own lives, it reminds us, do not fear multiplicity. Try many things. Play many roles. Let variety be your strength. A living tapestry, lessons in belonging and becoming. The Cambrian Sea did not need perfection. It needed participation. Every arthropod, from the smallest morella to the swiftest predator, belonged. Not because it excelled, but because it fit. It added something, a motion, a behavior, a ripple. The food chain was not just survival. It was a choreography. This ancient web, born over 500 million years ago, still hums beneath modern oceans. Its rules echo in coral reefs and forest floors. And at its heart is this truth, that to live is to feed and be fed, to act and be affected, to touch and be touched. In remembering the Cambrian food chain, we remember that life is not solitary, that every breath we take is linked to a leaf, to a tide, to an unseen arthropod grazing the ocean floor. So sleep gently now, dear soul. Let the sea hold you as it held them. Let the current of belonging wrap around you. You are not alone in the web. You are woven in. Part 3. Diversification of invertebrates. 1. Soft-bodied invertebrates of the Cambrian. Introduction, the gentle ones of the early sea. Let us begin again, beloved traveler, drifting through the tides of memory. The Cambrian world, once so still, now breathes with motion and softness. Among the many creatures that emerged, there were those without armor, without claws, without the hard edges of defense. These were the soft-bodied invertebrates, the first tender expressions of complexity. They did not build walls around themselves. Instead, they offered a different kind of strength, flexibility, sensitivity, and grace, while trilobites shimmered in their segmented armor, and Anomalocaris hunted with flair. These creatures slipped quietly through silt and sea, writing their stories in silence. They remind us, even before names and voices, that gentleness has always been part of life's vocabulary. Tonight, we listen to their tale, the worms of the Cambrian shapes of simplicity. Among the earliest soft-bodied animals were creatures resembling worms, simple in form, yet full of meaning. They came in many shapes, ribbon-like, segmented, thread-thin, or slightly coiled. Some were burrowers, others swam with undulating grace. They belonged to early lineages that would one day give rise to annelids, priapulids, and nemerteans. These worm-like animals played a quiet but essential role. They stirred sediments, mixed oxygen into the seabed, and opened new pathways in the Earth's crust. Their presence transformed the chemistry of marine environments, creating niches where other life could grow. They also marked a new form of movement, not drifting, but directed, not merely floating, but flowing. The way they carved through the seabed, leaving tiny trails behind, was an act of ecological authorship. Their soft bodies reshaped the very stage where the Cambrian drama would unfold. Though they left few fossils, impressions of their bodies, delicate traces in mud, remain like ancient whispers. They remind us that even those who move without sound can shift the world beneath them. In their simplicity lay a powerful truth. Life does not need grandeur to matter. Early nervous systems, feeling the world for the first time. The rise of soft-bodied invertebrates marked a turning point not just in form, but in sensation. These creatures were among the first to develop true nervous systems, delicate threads of signal and response that allowed them to interact with their environment. They began to feel, to sense pressure, temperature, perhaps even light. This was more than survival. It was the first stirring of awareness. Some had nerve cords that ran along their bodies. Others developed primitive ganglia, clusters of neurons that served as simple brains. These weren't minds in the modern sense, but they were beginnings, sparks of awareness flickering in the dark ocean. And with sensation came motion. With motion came intention. A creature that feels begins to choose when to flee, where to hide, how to explore. And in that choice lies a miracle, the beginnings of experience, of memory, of adaptation. These small leaps toward consciousness would change everything. They remind us that sensitivity is not a weakness but the beginning of deep connection. And they began here with soft creatures listening to the world. Diversity of form, flexibility as survival. Soft-bodied invertebrates did not take one form. They bloomed into many. Some developed bristles, others tentacles. Some grew flattened bodies for skimming across surfaces, while others coiled themselves like springs. Each form was an experiment, a whisper of possibility. This variety was their strength. With no shell to define them, they could adapt rapidly. They lived in crevices, beneath microbial mats, suspended in the water column, or burrowed deep into mud. Some evolved defensive features, slime secretions, retractable spines, or deceptive coloring. Others relied purely on speed or silence. Their forms were not fixed. They were fluid. The world around them was unstable. Tides shifted, predators emerged, oxygen varied. But their softness allowed them to bend where others broke, to yield without losing their place. Even now, in our own bodies, we carry the legacy of this flexibility, the softness of organs, the sensitivity of skin. In these gentle forms, life explored what it meant to be both vulnerable and resilient. Fossils in the dark, preserving the ephemeral. Unlike trilobites or shelled creatures, soft-bodied animals rarely fossilized. But in rare places like the Burgess Shale in Canada or Chengjiang in China, we find windows into their world. These fossils are not bones, but shadows. Flattened outlines of bodies, feathery impressions of gills, the faint curve of a nerve cord. They speak not through grandeur, but through ghostliness. The preservation of such detail required silence. Rapid burial, low oxygen, still water. It was as if the earth herself paused to hold these beings in memory. From these remnants, scientists have reconstructed dozens of species. Hallucigenia with its spines and legs, Opabinia with 5 eyes and a strange trunk, and many unnamed others. Each one a puzzle piece in evolution's great picture. These fossils speak softly of innovation, of tentative steps that led to greatness. Their preservation is a miracle, a reminder that even the most fragile lives can leave a mark, if only the world listens. Roles in Cambrian ecosystems, supporting the web. Soft-bodied invertebrates were not isolated. They were threads in a greater fabric. They filtered water, consumed bacteria, grazed on algae, and were eaten in turn by larger predators. They connected levels of the food web, bridging the microbial past to the macroscopic future. Some, like Wawaxia, wore soft scales for modest protection. Others, like Pikaia, swam with early notochords, a hint at the vertebrates to come. All played their part. Their roles were quiet, but vital. They oxygenated the seabed, recycled nutrients, and stabilized sediments. In doing so, they built the floor for ecosystems yet to bloom. Without them, the Cambrian explosion would have lacked foundation. They were not the stars, but the scaffolding, the quiet breath between louder moments, the ones who held the rhythm steady, a legacy of softness, strength, and sensitivity. Tonight, as you rest, remember this. The story of life is not written only in stone. It is also written in softness, in the vulnerable, the sensing, the unarmored. These early invertebrates did not roar. They pulsed, they felt, they adapted. Their nervous systems lit the path toward consciousness. Their bodies opened the possibilities of form. Their lives wove the first networks of interaction and support. Their story is still within us. In every breath you take, every pulse in your chest, you carry echoes of their presence. In the resilience of tissues, in the curve of our awareness, they linger. So sleep now, dear listener. Let the softness hold you. And know, even in a hard world, gentleness endures. 2. The earliest echinoderms. Introduction. A new symmetry beneath the sea. In the hushed twilight of the Cambrian seas, long before the coral gardens of later ages, a quiet miracle unfolded. Among the swirling plankton and drifting mats of algae, new shapes emerged, strange, slow-moving forms that did not hunt with jaws or swim with fins. Instead, they bloomed gently across the sea floor in perfect balance. These were the ancestors of starfish, sea urchins, and other echinoderms, life forms that would come to embody symmetry, patience, and the quiet strength of structure. Unlike the jointed legs of arthropods or the flexible coils of worms, these creatures formed themselves around a central axis, like sacred mandalas in motion. They did not shout their presence. They radiated it, a five-fold harmony that seemed to echo not only through their bodies, but through the water around them. Tonight, we listen not to conquest or competition, but to a deeper rhythm, the song of structure, the breath of balance. The first echinoderms invite us to feel the peace of stillness and the wisdom of slow change. The ancestors of starfish, seeds of a radiant future. The earliest echinoderms did not yet look like the starfish we know today, but they carried the essential blueprints. They emerged during the late Cambrian, perhaps 515 million years ago, in the shallow, oxygen-rich waters of newly formed continental shelves. Some were immobile, anchored to the sea floor like organic sculptures. Others could creep slowly along the sediment, their tiny tube feet acting as suction cups, exploring the substrate grain by grain. These movements were not rushed. They were deliberate, like breathwork practiced over millennia. Through them, we see the beginning of a lineage that would radiate in all directions, not just in form, but in function. Starfish that regenerate limbs, sea cucumbers that digest while gliding, brittle stars that twist with silent precision. The first echinoderms remind us that even rooted beginnings can lead to expansive destinies. Just as starfish can lose an arm and grow it back, we too can reclaim parts of ourselves we thought were gone. Resilience, it seems, is written not in hardness but in renewal. Primitive morphology, patterns of early balance. At the heart of the echinoderm identity lies an idea both simple and profound: radial symmetry. Unlike most creatures with a front and back, left and right, echinoderms grew outward from a center. Their bodies, often divided into 5 segments, revolved like stars around a core. This symmetry was not just aesthetic. It allowed them to interact with the world from all directions, to sense, to feed, and to move without a defined front. In a way, they were always facing everything at once. Many early echinoderms had calcite skeletons composed of interlocking plates, forming a mesh of armor that protected their soft inner organs. Their bodies might have appeared geometric, even alien, but within that geometry lay an elegant solution to survival. Some, like Helicoplacus, were torpedo-shaped and capable of slow movement. Others, like Archaroa, bore disc-like forms etched with 5-fold symmetry. Each design carried within it a deep biological meditation: how to live gently in a changing world. We too can learn from this pattern. In times of chaos, returning to our center, rebalancing from within, can be a quiet revolution. Life on the Cambrian seafloor, stillness in motion. Echinoderms did not chase. They listened. They did not dominate. They harmonized. In the layered sediments of Cambrian shallows, they took their place among microbial mats, sponges, and trilobites, not as predators or prey, but as keepers of the in-between. They fed by filter feeding, by grazing, or by absorbing nutrients through their skin. Their tube feet, powered by an internal water vascular system, allowed for movement and sensing, a gentle choreography of pressure and pulse. Their lives remind us that not all power is aggressive. There is also power in presence, in knowing the rhythms of tide and current, in adjusting slowly instead of reacting quickly. To be an echinoderm was to become fluent in patience. In our own lives, we often seek to rush forward, but these ancient beings show us another way: to move deliberately, to attune to the environment, to listen before we act. Their calm is a form of strength that transcends eras. Fossils and discovery echoes in stone. Unlike many soft-bodied creatures of the Cambrian, echinoderms left behind durable relics. Their calcite plates fossilized readily, providing a rich archive of form and experimentation. From the rugged cliffs of Newfoundland to the ancient layers of Australia, their imprints remain. Fossils of early echinoderms such as Archaroa, stromatocistites, and Gogia tell of diversity already blooming. Some had stalks that tethered them to the sea floor, like anchors in shifting sand. Others floated just above the bottom, held aloft by currents and chance. These fossils are more than stone. They are preserved pauses in deep time. Through them, paleontologists trace not only structure, but behavior, growth rings, breakage, regeneration. Each is a quiet chapter in the story of adaptation. And as we study them, we too become listeners. Holding their forms in our hands, we touch the calm endurance of a world long past. In their silence, they still speak. Roles in early ecosystems, architects of balance. Echinoderms played roles that often went unseen but were crucial. As sediment stirrers and surface grazers, they aerated the seafloor, prevented dead zones, and helped cycle nutrients. They were not stars of the Cambrian stage, but they held the sets in place. Some were food for larger animals, while others kept microbial growth in check. Their slow movements and low-energy lifestyles contributed to ecosystem stability, a kind of ecological meditation. Balance was their gift, and even now, modern ecosystems depend on their descendants. Sea urchins trim algae from coral reefs. Starfish manage mollusk populations. Sea cucumbers recycle organic material across the ocean floor. We may not always see the work of healers, but we feel its result. In that same way, the earliest echinoderms shaped the harmony of the seas without needing to be seen. Their influence flowed outward, like ripples from a steady center. The healing within lessons from the ancient deep. In the earliest echinoderms, we find more than biology. We find a reflection of inner life. They teach us that stillness is not stagnation, but awareness. That slowness is not weakness, but presence. Their fivefold symmetry invites us to find our own center, to return to balance after being pulled in many directions. Their regenerative limbs whisper that it is possible to heal, that no loss is final. They lived without rushing, without competing, and yet they endured. Through extinction events and shifting continents, their descendants still pulse in today's oceans. In moments of stress, imagine being like an echinoderm, rooted, receptive, resilient. Let your breath move like waves through your limbs. Let your awareness radiate outward from the heart. The ancestors of starfish do not just belong to the past. They live in the shape of your peace. 3. The Cambrian web of life. The ocean as a loom of connections. In the deep past of the Cambrian world, life was not yet a roaring spectacle of predators and prey. Instead, it unfolded like a tapestry, quietly being woven beneath the waves. Threads of algae, trilobites, worms, and sponges looped together, forming one of the earliest biological networks. And though silent, it was a living fabric, responsive, adaptive, and deeply interconnected. Tonight, as your breath slows and your mind drifts towards stillness, imagine that ancient sea not as a battlefield, but as a sanctuary of mutual rhythms. In those soft depths, life first learned that to survive was not always to dominate, but to relate. Let us wander now through this sleeping web of life, where every strand was touched by another. The rise of relationships, early symbiosis and coexistence. Long before the complex interdependencies of rainforests and coral reefs, early Cambrian creatures were already forming the bonds that would become the backbone of ecosystems. Microbial mats served as both food and shelter. Trilobites grazed their surface, stirring sediment and releasing nutrients. In turn, those nutrients fed filamentous algae, which provided oxygen and softened ocean currents. This was the beginning of ecological choreography. No single organism thrived alone. Worms burrowed through microbial layers, aerating the seafloor. Soft-bodied creatures found hiding places in sponge forests. Brachiopods clung gently to sediment mounds, their valves opening and closing in tidal rhythm. Filter feeders positioned themselves where currents brought the most nourishment. In this cradle of relationships, the Cambrian Sea became not a static scene, but a dance of interactions. The first whispers of symbiosis were deeply healing. We too are held together by unseen bonds, to community, to breath, to the quiet exchange of care. The Cambrian reminds us that connection is not a luxury, but a way of being. The dance of competition, survival without chaos. Though the Cambrian world fostered cooperation, it did not exclude challenge. With more species came overlapping roles and thus competition. But this early competition was not warlike. It was more a silent calibration of niches. Trilobites, worms, and filter feeders adapted to avoid direct overlap. Some evolved to forage during different hours, others in different layers of sediment. Predatory arthropods like Anomalocaris patrolled the waters, but even their presence shaped the behavior of prey in meaningful ways, nudging creatures to burrow deeper, move more cleverly, or evolve spines and shells. Even competition was part of the ecosystem's harmony. It introduced variation, strategy, and opportunity for differentiation. What could have been chaos became a system of flowing adjustments. In our own lives, perhaps the Cambrian offers this gentle invitation. Not all struggle needs to be loud. Some of the most transformative growth happens in quiet adaptation. Energy loops, producers, consumers, decomposers. One of the most profound developments in Cambrian ecology was the emergence of energy cycling. Photosynthetic algae captured sunlight, converting it into sugar. Grazers like small trilobites, early mollusks, and bottom-feeding worms consumed this algae. Predators such as early radiodonts fed on those grazers. And beneath them all, bacteria and other decomposers processed the remains, returning nutrients to the ecosystem. This three-tiered cycle, producer, consumer, recycler, formed a complete loop. It meant ecosystems could sustain themselves. Nothing was wasted. Every organism, in living or dying, gave back to the system. These loops created rhythm and pulse, a metabolism for the sea. Even now, our oceans and forests hum with the same song. To live in this loop is to recognize your own role in a larger rhythm. You are nourished, you nourish, and you will one day return your elements to the whole. There is peace in that circularity, a reminder that existence is not linear, but ever-flowing. Keystone creatures, quiet shapers of stability. Some Cambrian animals, though not the most abundant or flashy, played outsized roles in maintaining ecological balance. Sponges filtered vast quantities of water, clearing out debris and regulating flow. Worms turned the seabed like humble gardeners. Small arthropods stirred sediment and allowed oxygen to penetrate deeper layers. Brachiopods anchored themselves with stalks, offering stable surfaces and tiny crevices for other species. Certain microbial mats helped bind sediments, preventing erosion and enabling larger structures to form. Their presence allowed the web of life to settle and spread. These were the first keystone species, organisms without which the system would unravel. Their actions, often invisible, supported hundreds of others. And so it is in life. Sometimes the quietest presences are the most vital. The one who listens, the one who creates calm, the one who holds space. In honoring these subtle roles, we honor the architecture of belonging itself, building biotic resilience, diversity as defense. With time, the Cambrian web became more intricate. Different species overlapped in function, creating redundancy. If one grazer died out, another could take its place. This biological backup system helped ecosystems weather change. Currents shifted, climates fluctuated, yet the system held. Biodiversity became an insurance policy. Some trilobites preferred deeper waters. Others thrived near the shore. Some filter feeders adapted to fast-moving currents, while others clung to still pools. This range of forms meant that no single disruption could collapse the system. This is biotic resilience, the strength born of diversity. The more kinds of life within a system, the more likely it is to recover. Our inner worlds mirror this. Emotional resilience often comes not from a single strength, but from a range of coping tools, support systems, and perspectives. The Cambrian teaches us to cultivate variety, not only in nature, but within. Balance is not found in uniformity, but in the music of many instruments playing together. From web to legacy, threads that still endure. Though the Cambrian period ended hundreds of millions of years ago, its networks did not vanish. Their echoes remain in modern reefs, forests, and the interconnected food webs of today. What began as fragile links among ancient creatures has grown into the resilient biosphere that cradles us now. Each fossil is a memory, each sediment layer a chapter, each surviving lineage, from echinoderms to mollusks to arthropods, is a living thread from that long-ago tapestry. When we protect coral reefs or wetlands today, we are not only saving ecosystems, we are honoring the echoes of Cambrian kin. And so, dear dreamer, as you lie still beneath your blankets tonight, consider this. You are part of that legacy. Your breath, your relationships, your small acts of care, they too form threads in the living web. We are never isolated. Not truly. Even in silence, you are connected. Like those earliest beings beneath Cambrian waters, you are part of the story of life, an ever-unfolding masterpiece of belonging. Rest now in that knowing. Part 4. Cambrian Flora and Microbiology. 1. Photosynthetic plankton and the power of ocean light. Before the tides were blue, light finds the sea. Long before the Cambrian became a stage of creatures with shells and limbs, before trilobites traced paths across seabeds, something quieter began to bloom, not in the bones of animals, but in the breath of light. In those ancient waters, Earth had only recently found its balance. The long snowball ages had thawed, and the planet's surface had softened into gentle seas. Here, drifting invisibly in the shallows, were the first true keepers of sunlight, photosynthetic plankton. These tiny beings, some bacteria, some algae, began to capture sunlight and weave it into sugar. Their bodies shimmered like glass in the sunlit zones, not seeking attention, but offering transformation. They were the first to turn light into food, carbon into life, emptiness into abundance. And though they were unseen by the naked eye, they became the pulse of the Cambrian Ocean. Every breath of oxygen we take, every heartbeat in the chain of life, owes something to these quiet engineers. As you rest tonight, know that the world's first whisper of aliveness was not a roar. It was a flicker of green in the water, the rise of plankton communities, invisible forests in the sea. While forests on land were still hundreds of millions of years away, their blue-green ancestors had already begun forming canopies in the ocean. Photosynthetic plankton, like cyanobacteria and early algae, gathered in blooms so vast they could change the color of the sea. To the ancient world, They were living clouds suspended in water, drifting with tides and light. Some floated freely, like Prochlorococcus, soaking in light with every gentle roll of the wave. Others clung together in mats, binding with bacteria and forming floating ecosystems. Together, they created the first communal layers of life in the sunlit ocean. These communities weren't just passive. They were responsive. They adjusted to seasonal shifts, tidal pulses, and nutrient flows. When iron or phosphate became scarce, they adapted, either by forming resting spores or switching metabolic gears. In doing so, they taught the biosphere one of its first lessons: to remain is to respond. Their flexibility wasn't just survival. It was a quiet kind of wisdom. They moved with the water. They grew with the light. They gave without expecting. In a world still learning to live, plankton showed that life can be both powerful and soft, that growth doesn't have to be loud. Oxygen and the Great Awakening. As these plankton communities flourished, they began to change the very chemistry of the earth. Through photosynthesis, they released oxygen, not as a plan, but as a byproduct of light's transformation into life. Slowly, steadily, this oxygen began to fill the oceans and drift upward into the sky. This wasn't the first time Earth had tasted oxygen. Long ago, the Great Oxidation Event had sparked an earlier atmospheric shift. But it was the Cambrian's plankton that sustained it, not in bursts but in balance. With more oxygen came more possibilities. Larger animals could develop. Energetic metabolisms could be sustained. Nervous systems could spark. The trilobite's vision, the predator's pursuit, the coral's calcium. All of it stood on the shoulders of plankton's invisible labor. Tonight, as you breathe in, perhaps consider this. Each inhalation carries the memory of their quiet work. Healing isn't always the dramatic moment. Sometimes it is a steady presence, like air, like plankton, lifting others without needing to be seen. Feeding the Cambrian web, the first producers. In every ecosystem, someone must begin the story of energy. In Cambrian seas, that storyteller was plankton. As primary producers, they formed the base of every food chain, supporting grazers, predators, scavengers, and everything in between. Tiny zooplankton, like early rotifers or protoarthropods, fed directly on photosynthetic species. Larger organisms then fed on those grazers, and thus the energy of sunlight passed from one being to another, a current of nourishment moving through flesh and fin. The simplicity of this loop belied its elegance. Plankton didn't just start the food web, they sustained it. Like patient thread weavers, they offered themselves again and again, giving rise to abundance from transparency. It is a gentle reminder. We are nourished by others, often invisibly. A teacher's word, a parent's patience, a stranger's kindness, each a form of plankton in our own lives. Quiet gifts, sustaining unseen ecosystems of emotion and strength. Engines of evolution, when plankton changed the game. Beyond feeding life, plankton also reshaped its direction. The oxygen they produced enabled the development of larger genomes. With more energy available, evolution could afford complexity. Longer bodies, layered tissues, experimental movement. Some scientists suggest that the Cambrian explosion, this sudden bloom of animal forms, was only possible because plankton lit the way. By oxygenating the oceans and stabilizing carbon cycles, they removed limits that once held life in simple forms. Their presence allowed diversity to blossom. Creatures could experiment, with eyes, with legs, with symmetries never seen before. Evolution gained playgrounds it had never known. So too with us. When we receive what we need, oxygen, safety, nourishment, we grow not just upward, but outward. Possibility opens like a flower. Plankton's gift was not only sustenance, but permission to imagine. Threads into the present, echoes in modern oceans. Though the Cambrian seas have long receded, their planktonic architects remain. Modern oceans still shimmer with descendants of those ancient light catchers. Diatoms, dinoflagellates, coccolithophores. These organisms continue to cycle carbon, feed marine food webs, and produce half of Earth's oxygen. Their beauty is often hidden in plain sight. In the twilight gleam of a wave, the iridescent glow of a bloom. They remind us that some of Earth's oldest wisdom lives not in fossils, but in daily breath. To witness plankton is to glimpse resilience. Despite mass extinctions, climate shifts, and human impact, they endure. In them we see nature's quiet vow to adapt, to give, to remain. So, as you close your eyes tonight, picture them drifting gently in moonlit water, ancient and new, soft and mighty, holding the story of light turned into life. You too are part of that story. Two benthic microbes and the stability of the Cambrian seafloor. The hidden garden beneath the waves. Beneath the Cambrian oceans, beyond the sunlit layers where plankton shimmered and trilobites danced, lay a quieter world, the seafloor. This was a place of stillness and shadows, where life unfolded not in a rush, but in patience. Here, in the soft mud and gentle slopes, an ancient realm of microbial life took root. These benthic microbes, tiny, invisible, persistent, were the custodians of the seabed. They clung to mineral grains, nestled in crevices, and formed dense biofilms across the sediment. Though their voices were silent and their shapes unseen, their presence was foundational. They were not visitors of the seafloor. They were its architects. Like caretakers in a hidden garden, they tended to the cycles of decay and rebirth. They broke down organic matter, recycled nutrients, and stabilized the shifting sands. In a world where death was as constant as life, these organisms made sure nothing was wasted. They also processed sulfur and nitrogen compounds, shaping the chemical composition of their environments, transforming toxicity into fertility. Imagine, as you drift toward sleep, a vast, unseen forest beneath the waves, not made of trees, but of living threads and quiet chemistries. It is here that the first stable soils of the ocean were sown, and from this stability all else could grow. Microbial mats, living layers of memory. Before there were reefs, before corals built castles of calcium, there were microbial mats, sheets of life woven tightly across the seafloor. These mats, built by communities of bacteria and archaea, were layered like the pages of a diary written in time. Each layer had a story. The uppermost absorbed sunlight and performed photosynthesis. Beneath it, other microbes consumed the byproducts and transformed them into nutrients. Still deeper, in darkness, anaerobic organisms processed sulfur and methane, whispering ancient secrets of metabolism. Even further down, some microbes used iron or manganese as their terminal electron acceptors, giving rise to subtle chemical gradients across millimeters of mat depth. These mats didn't just live, they remembered. They left traces in the rock record known as stromatolites and wrinkle structures, fossils not of bodies but of behaviors. In their patterns, scientists see echoes of tides, seasons, and even microbial cooperation. These biofilms also resisted erosion and helped stabilize sediments, influencing the formation of shallow marine landscapes. Healing can sometimes feel like this, a layering of experiences, each feeding the next, each deeper than the last. The microbial mats remind us that even the smallest actions can leave a durable mark, not in shouts, but in silent, continuous care. The great recyclers, decomposers of the deep. Every living thing eventually returns to the earth, and in the Cambrian, it was the benthic decomposers that made this return possible. As soft-bodied animals died and settled on the seafloor, these microbes began their quiet work. Bacteria and archaea fed on the dead, breaking down tissues and returning nutrients to the sediment. This wasn't decay as destruction. It was transformation. Their chemistry turned what once was life into the building blocks of future generations. They metabolized proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates, releasing nitrogen, phosphorus, and trace elements essential to new life forms. In the dark, without eyes or ceremony, these microbes sustained the entire ecosystem. Their work nourished plankton blooms above, enriched microbial mats nearby, and supported new life in the ever-cycling web of existence. Even larger Cambrian fauna benefited from these processes indirectly, through enriched sediments and enhanced food webs. As we lie still at night, letting go of a long day, we too engage in a kind of quiet recycling. Thoughts settle, emotions digest. In the silence, we renew. Like the decomposers of the Cambrian, healing often begins where the world grows quiet, stabilizing the muddy foundation. The Cambrian seafloor was not a static place. Waves rolled above, currents shifted sediment, creatures burrowed and stirred the mud. But amidst all this motion, benthic microbes played a key role in holding it all together. Through sticky secretions and biofilm creation, microbes bound particles into clumps, turning loose silt into stable substrate. This stabilization allowed other organisms to colonize the seabed, from early worms to sponges and echinoderms. They created microenvironments, oxygenated pockets, and structured soil where once there was only drifting debris. Their polysaccharide-rich extracellular substances acted like glue in the ocean's crust, influencing not only stability but the way sediments compacted and layered over time. Their legacy persists in modern sedimentology, where similar microbial textures offer clues about past environments. Sometimes, when life feels unstable, we must return to our foundation. What binds us? What holds our inner world together? The Cambrian microbes teach us that even the softest organisms can build the strongest ground. Symbiosis in the sediments. Microbes didn't work alone. In the nooks and layers of the sediment, early animals and microbes began forming partnerships. Some worms hosted bacteria in their guts that helped digest tough material. Others may have grazed microbial mats, shaping them with each bite. These interactions weren't always visible, but they created bonds that shaped evolution. Cooperation, not just competition, built the tapestry of the Cambrian floor. Some microorganisms thrived in the burrows of small animals, using the oxygen gradients created by their hosts. In return, they detoxified waste products or produced compounds that deterred predators. This level of biological networking helped forge early ecological webs. The sediments became not just a medium of life, but a platform for communication and mutual survival. To heal is also to connect. Like early life forms that found strength in each other, we too find stability in quiet relationships, mutual exchanges, and invisible support. The ocean floor was not a battleground, but a cradle of interdependence. Pillars of the Cambrian ecosystem. Benthic microbes did more than recycle or stabilize, they powered resilience. As climate patterns changed or oxygen levels fluctuated, these microorganisms responded first. Their metabolic flexibility enabled the ecosystem to absorb shock and adapt. When surface plankton struggled due to nutrient shortages, benthic processes often buffered the crisis by cycling materials upward again. They were, in a very real way, the invisible engines that kept the system running. Their activity influenced oxygen gradients, nutrient flows, and even sediment chemistry, shaping the conditions in which life could thrive. Modern scientists now believe that microbial influence extended far beyond the Cambrian. The legacy of these tiny beings continues in today's sediments, where similar microbial communities still play roles in carbon capture, pollutant breakdown, and ecological restoration. They remind us that profound change often begins at the smallest scale, that resilience does not come from rigidity, but from quiet flexibility, that ecosystems, like people, thrive not only when they shine brightly, but when they are quietly supported by the unseen. And in that constancy we find hope, that healing, when rooted deeply, can endure the weight of time. Fossils of stillness, remembering the seafloor. Though soft and delicate, the legacy of benthic microbes endures in stone. In the fossil record, we find microbial textures, feeding trails, and bioturbated layers, signs of lives that stirred the mud, layered the mats, and decomposed the fallen. These are not fossils of grandeur, but of grounding. They remind us that not all history is written in teeth or armor. Much of it lies in what was tended quietly. The caretaking, the stabilizing, the slow cycles of return. As you drift into sleep, know this: the softest lives can leave the most lasting impressions. The Cambrian seafloor was not merely a backdrop, but a living field of care, where every grain of sand was touched by the hands of microbes, and every stillness held the potential for growth. You too are part of that foundation. 3. The influence of microbes and plants on Cambrian animals. A gentle web beneath the waves. The Cambrian world was not just a realm of predators and prey, of armored trilobites and swift-swimming crustaceans. Beneath that spectacle was a quieter force, humming softly at the base of the food chain. Microbes, algae, and benthic mats did not roar or chase, but their presence shaped every ripple of life in the sea. Like the soft pulse beneath a heartbeat, they held everything together. In shallow waters where sunlight still touched the seafloor, cyanobacteria and green algae thrived. These photosynthetic organisms were the great providers. With light as their currency, they wove energy into the very fabric of the sea. Around their presence, the early food webs assembled. As you lie still tonight, imagine floating above that ancient world. Below you, glowing carpets of microbial mats, swaying filaments of algae, and bubbles of oxygen rising like silent prayers. Without them, the ocean would have remained a quiet abyss. But with them, life had fuel. The first meals, feeding the Cambrian boom. The explosion of animal diversity during the Cambrian could not have happened in isolation. To support new mouths, there needed to be food, and plenty of it. Photosynthetic microbes and algae filled this role with quiet generosity. They were grazed upon by soft-bodied feeders, scraped from rocks by primitive mouthparts, and filtered from water by early suspension feeders. Tiny herbivores like early arthropods and worm-like creatures depended on these primary producers. In turn, they became prey for larger hunters, setting in motion a cascade of interactions that shaped the first complex food chains. Nutrient-rich mats also became feeding grounds, where even detritivores and decomposers thrived. This relationship reflects a truth that still holds. that every vibrant system depends on something humble and foundational. The plants and microbes of the Cambrian were not dramatic, but they were essential, the silent meal that fed a revolution, shaping the life cycle, a world timed by light and decay. Cambrian animals did not simply exist in isolation from their environment. Their very life cycles were intertwined with microbial rhythms. Cyanobacteria and algae, blooming with the sun and retreating with the dark, set the pace of productivity. The rise and fall of these blooms influenced mating seasons, feeding cycles, and migration patterns. In some environments, microbial blooms created oxygen-rich oases where more complex animals could thrive. In others, decaying mats led to zones of low oxygen, challenging organisms to adapt or move. These fluctuating patterns encouraged evolutionary innovation. Gills that filtered efficiently, mobility to escape dead zones, and behaviors tuned to environmental cues. The earliest larvae and planktonic stages of many animals may have relied on microalgae as their first food. These connections, fragile and vital, wove a living calendar that helped time reproduction and survival. Like seasons in our own lives, the Cambrian seas moved to rhythms deeper than instinct. Rhythms whispered by sunlight, decay, and microscopic abundance. Microbial architects, building habitats and refuge. Beyond feeding, microbes shaped the very spaces in which Cambrian animals lived. Their mats stabilized sediments, turning unstable seabeds into colonizable ground. Stromatolites, layered structures built by microbial activity, became the reefs of their time, offering shelter to small creatures and hiding places from predators. By oxygenating localized areas or modifying pH levels, microbial colonies created microhabitats that supported biodiversity. In some cases, they prevented erosion, allowing burrowers and sediment dwellers to thrive. These ecological engineers made it possible for fragile animal forms to survive in a changing world. Imagine a shrimp-like creature slipping between layers of microbial mat, its feelers brushing against threads of bacteria, its world defined not just by rocks or currents, but by a living, pulsing environment. Microbes were not background, they were the stage itself. Interactions and coevolution, partnerships in progress. As Cambrian ecosystems matured, microbes and animals did more than coexist. They began to influence one another's evolution. Some animals developed specialized appendages to scrape or graze microbial films. Others evolved digestive tracts adapted to process algal matter efficiently. Certain microbial colonies thrived better when grazed moderately, a balance that ensured their spread without overgrowth. Symbiotic relationships began to emerge, including early gut flora that helped animals break down complex molecules. The boundaries between plant, microbe, and animal began to blur. Through these interactions, ecosystems became more resilient. They diversified not by isolating parts, but by interweaving them. Just as healing today often comes through relationship, not withdrawal, the Cambrian world healed itself through connection, mutual shaping, and shared survival. The living quilt, a foundation for future evolution. All of this, the feeding, timing, sheltering, and symbiosis, laid a foundation for the evolutionary wonders to come. Without the groundwork of microbial and algal influence, the explosion of animal life would have been short-lived. Instead, it became a rising tide. Many lineages that persisted beyond the Cambrian, from mollusks to echinoderms, did so by continuing these interactions. Algae would become partners in coral reefs. Microbes would colonize guts, skins, and soils. The basic template for ecosystems still in use today was drafted in those early seas. And so, As you close your eyes tonight, picture not a loud battlefield, but a quiet web, not a clash of beasts, but a weaving of threads, of light, of breath, of need and offering. The Cambrian was not only an age of innovation, but of deep interdependence. In the next chapter, we will journey above the seafloor to witness changes in climate and geology that reshaped continents and oceans. From rising sea levels to tectonic drift, Earth's restlessness would set the stage for the next acts of evolution. Join us as we follow the pulse of the planet itself. Part 5: Cambrian Climate and Geological Changes. 1. Cambrian Climate. A world awakens, the end of ice, the rise of warmth. Close your eyes and return not just in space, but in time. Drift back over 500 million years to a planet just beginning to exhale after eons locked in frost. The Cambrian period dawned like a slow sunrise after the endless night of the Proterozoic. The glaciers that had once swallowed continents were in retreat. Ice, once the silent tyrant of Earth, was melting, and in its place warmth began to flow. This was no sudden event, but a patient transformation. Volcanoes breathed carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, slowly raising global temperatures. The Earth, still shifting and stretching, released buried gases from the depths. Sunlight, once scattered by frozen skies, now reached the ocean surface with greater intensity. The greenhouse effect, still natural and balanced, brought life-sustaining warmth. This warming was more than physical comfort. It was a biological invitation. In warmer seas, chemical reactions accelerated. Metabolism quickened. Oxygen dissolved more efficiently into the shallows. It was as if the planet had unclenched its fist, and life responded, not with a roar, but with a slow, rippling song. The great Cambrian seas stirred, beckoning to every cell, every gene, every possibility. Rising seas, a delicate expansion. As the glaciers melted and tectonic shifts subtly reconfigured Earth's surface, the seas began to rise. They spread across low-lying regions, flooding ancient basins, creeping gently over continental margins. These transgressions were not floods of destruction, but tides of opportunity. Shallow seas, with their sunlight and nutrient access, became the great incubators of early animal life. They formed vast epicontinental seas, wide, shallow bodies of water that stretched across what are now dry continents. In these calm, warm waters, entire ecosystems blossomed. The sea levels did not simply rise uniformly. They pulsed with the breath of the planet, uplifting here, retreating there, guided by tectonic flexing and climatic rhythm. Each rise brought new habitats, each fall, new pressures. Life, as always, adapted. In our own lives, too, we experience such tides. We flood with change, then recede into stillness. The Cambrian teaches us to embrace both, to trust that even when the shore disappears, something vast is opening. The birth of continental shelves where life meets light. With the rising seas came the birth of one of Earth's most vital environments, the continental shelf. Neither deep sea nor dry land, the shelf became a liminal space where life could experiment. These shallow platforms, sloping gently from continents into the sea, offered a perfect balance of energy and stability. Nutrient runoff from land enriched the waters. Sunlight bathed the surface. The temperature was mild, the currents gentle. It was here that early coral-like structures, algae gardens, and communities of trilobites, worms, and soft-bodied animals began to thrive. Here, photosynthesis and heterotrophy held hands. Here, predator and prey began their ancient dance. The continental shelf became nature's grand stage for evolution. And from this stage, the Cambrian explosion erupted not in violence, but in vibrancy, as if life, long held back by glacial stillness, had finally been invited to move, to stretch, to sing. Planet of patchwork climates. Despite global trends toward warming, Cambrian Earth was not a uniform world. It was a mosaic of climates, shaped by latitude, ocean currents, and geography. Some regions baked under tropical suns, while others still clung to chill. Supercontinents like Gondwana sat near the South Pole, covered in ice caps in the earlier Cambrian, only to drift slowly into warmer waters. Other landmasses floated closer to the equator, basking in the new sun. Ocean currents, still forming their global pathways, carried warmth and nutrients unevenly. This created zones of rich biodiversity and others where life struggled. Such contrasts forged resilience. Organisms evolved not only to live, but to adapt, to tolerate shifts in salinity, temperature, oxygen. In the diversity of environments, nature found opportunity. Isn't it the same in our own emotional landscapes? We are not uniform beings. We carry summer and winter within us. And like those early creatures, we too learn to adapt, to move gently between brightness and shadow. Oxygen and energy, invisible but essential. One of the quiet revolutions of the Cambrian was invisible, the continued rise of atmospheric and oceanic oxygen. This gas, produced by cyanobacteria and algae over hundreds of millions of years, finally reached a threshold where complex life could flourish. With more oxygen came more energy. Cells could now burn nutrients more efficiently. Larger bodies became viable. Active movement, predator-prey dynamics, and neural complexity blossomed in the oxygen-rich shallows. Oxygen shaped not just bodies, but behaviors. Organisms no longer had to drift passively. They could swim, dig, chase. Ice evolved. Nervous systems grew. The invisible breath of the planet became the pulse of evolution. Even today, as we breathe without thinking, oxygen connects us to that ancient awakening. With every inhale, we echo that moment in Earth's history when air became more than air. It became possibility. Earth in motion, tectonics, and time. Beneath all this life, the Earth moved. Tectonic plates, restless and slow, continued their drift. They opened new ocean basins and closed others. Chains of volcanic islands formed along ridges. Subduction zones gave birth to mountains beneath the sea. These motions shaped climate in subtle ways. The positioning of continents affected ocean currents and wind patterns. Volcanic activity added CO2, influencing temperature. The changing map of Earth redirected life's flow again and again. Yet these shifts were not chaotic. They were rhythms of deep time. Like a sleeping giant adjusting its limbs, the planet moved with purpose, even if we cannot always see it. In this, too, we find healing. Sometimes what looks like disruption is simply rearrangement. What feels like loss is really transition. The Earth never stops moving, and neither do we. The Cambrian Climate Symphony. Altogether, the Cambrian climate was not a static background, but an active participant in life's unfolding story. Warmth nurtured metabolism. Sea level change sculpted new habitats. Oxygen breathed energy into motion, and tectonics remixed the map beneath it all. This symphony of factors did not play in perfect harmony, but in layered complexity. Some parts surged while others paused. Some areas thrived while others faded. But the whole moved forward step by step, epoch by epoch. And just as a symphony is not defined by a single note, the Cambrian world was not made by any one change. It was the interweaving of temperature, water, land, and air, a fragile, powerful composition. Tonight, as you lay down in stillness, let your mind float through those ancient seas. Let the warmth of ancient sunlight touch your skin. Let the tides rise and fall around you. You are not separate from this story. You are made of it. The great tectonic shifts, mountains underwater, continents on the move. In our next journey, we will follow the movements of Earth itself. How plates collided, rift, and carried ecosystems with them. How volcanism and erosion shaped the seafloor. And how every motion, though slow, left a ripple that carried through the ages. Stay close to the breath of the planet. The story continues. 2. Tectonic activity during the Cambrian. Restless foundations, the slow dance of Earth's plates. Imagine the Earth not as fixed, but as flowing. Beneath our feet, the surface is divided into immense, shifting slabs called tectonic plates. During the Cambrian period, these plates continued their slow-motion waltz, shaping the oceans, the continents, and the very pathways of evolution. This was a world without modern continents. Instead, fragmented landmasses drifted across vast seas, guided by the heat rising from Earth's mantle. Gondwana, a supercontinent in the making, began to stretch and spread across the southern hemisphere. Smaller plates like Laurentia, Baltica, and Siberia floated closer to the equator. These movements were not just cartographic curiosities. They rewrote the map of habitats. As plates collided, pulled apart, or slipped past each other, they created rifts, mountain ranges, ocean basins, and volcanic arcs. And each of these geological events shaped climate, circulation, and the fabric of life. In our own emotional landscapes, we too experience these shifts. Slow changes, deep pressures, silent reconfigurations. Sometimes what looks like rupture is simply a redirection. The Cambrian reminds us that foundations can move and still support life. Mountains beneath the sea, the birth of submarine chains. Not all mountains rise to touch the sky. Many form deep beneath the waves, in the shadowed silence of the ocean floor. During the Cambrian, tectonic spreading centers birthed immense submarine mountain chains. As plates pulled apart, magma surged upward, cooling into new crust and raising underwater ridges that spanned continents. These mid-ocean ridges became underwater highways, directing the movement of water, heat, and nutrients. Hydrothermal vents spewed mineral-rich water, creating chemical gradients that nourished entire ecosystems. Around these vents, life thrived in the dark, without sunlight, sustained by chemosynthesis. It's humbling to realize that some of Earth's earliest, most resilient life forms lived not in sunny shallows, but in pressure-crushed darkness. Their presence speaks to a fundamental truth. Life does not require comfort, only opportunity. The hidden mountains of the Cambrian were proof that even in places of extreme stress, growth is possible. Even in the deep, something beautiful can rise. Volcanic breath, fire beneath the waters. Tectonic activity during the Cambrian also gave rise to volcanic arcs, chains of volcanoes forming above subduction zones, where one tectonic plate slides beneath another. These volcanoes, often hidden beneath the sea, were not merely destructive. They were part of Earth's respiration. Volcanoes released carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, contributing to the greenhouse effect that helped warm the Cambrian climate. Ash and lava brought new minerals to ocean basins, enriching marine environments. Though eruptions could be sudden and fierce, their long-term effects often seeded renewal. Much like emotional outbursts, Volcanoes were agents of both release and transformation. They remind us that from heat and upheaval can come nourishment, that not all fire is ruin, some fire forges beginnings, changing ocean gateways, redirecting the currents of life. As continents shifted, they redefined the boundaries of ancient seas. Ocean gateways opened and closed. Shallow inland seas spilled over into deeper basins. Narrow straits emerged between colliding landmasses. These changes altered ocean currents, salinity patterns, and nutrient flow. Circulation systems became more complex, influencing where organisms could live and how ecosystems connected. Warm equatorial waters could now reach higher latitudes. Cold, nutrient-rich currents upwelled along new coasts. Some species migrated, others perished. The ocean's heartbeat, its currents, was guided by the architecture of the seafloor. And like the emotional currents in our lives, these flows determined what thrived and what faded. Tectonic activity did not just shape continents. It sculpted the invisible forces that moved life forward. Microcontinents and margins, the edges of expansion. Not all tectonic events are grand collisions. Many are subtle. Small land fragments called microcontinents detached from larger masses and drifted in isolation. Passive margins formed where continents moved away from active tectonic zones, creating broad, stable shelves ideal for life. These quieter regions of tectonic activity became nurseries for diversity. Without frequent upheaval, life had time to root, diversify, and establish complex communities. Cambrian reef systems, microbial mats, and invertebrate colonies often flourished along these calm continental edges. There is a lesson here. Growth sometimes happens best in stillness. In zones of low drama and high stability, subtle beauty takes shape. We often seek drama and transformation, but the Cambrian reminds us of the healing in quiet continuity. Biosphere in motion, how Earth's shifts reshaped life. Tectonic movements were not isolated from biology. They directly influenced the biosphere. As landmasses moved, species were split or merged. Ecosystems were relocated. Habitats expanded, contracted, or transformed entirely. Isolation led to diversification. Oceanic barriers promoted endemism. Where plates converged, environments became dynamic and rich with possibility. This constant tectonic reshuffling acted as a grand experiment in evolution. Today, we are shaped by those ancient choices. The seaways opened, the mountains raised, the islands formed. Our biological story is inseparable from the planet's restless crust. And just like life, we too evolve through movement, through boundary and reunion, through the quiet tremble of change beneath the surface. Next, the Cambrian oceans, salt currents, and the microbial engineers. As we continue our journey, we will descend once more into the waters of ancient Earth. There, we will explore how salinity and temperature shaped marine chemistry, how ocean currents structured life, and how unseen microbial forces maintained balance beneath the waves. Let the breath of the earth guide you onward. The ancient sea still sings. 3. The Cambrian marine environment. A salty beginning, the chemistry of life's cradle. Imagine the Cambrian oceans not as still bodies of water, but as dynamic cauldrons where chemistry met biology in a dance of creation. One of the most vital elements of this aquatic stage was salinity, the concentration of dissolved salts in seawater. In the Cambrian, salinity was not yet stabilized as it is today. Instead, it fluctuated across regions, forming a mosaic of marine microenvironments. Some shallow seas, isolated by landmasses or tidal patterns, grew hypersaline, creating dense briny habitats that only the most resilient life forms could survive. Others, freshly connected to open ocean currents, were more dilute, nourishing plankton blooms and supporting primitive filter feeders. These saline gradients determined not only where organisms could live but how they evolved. Enzymes, cell membranes, and entire metabolic systems had to adapt to these chemical constraints. Salinity sculpted physiology, behavior, and ecosystems. For us today, it is a reminder of the invisible forces shaping our inner and outer lives. Like the early ocean, our environments influence our growth in subtle yet profound ways. Stability is not a prerequisite for life. Sometimes, it is the fluctuations, the changing tides, that inspire the greatest adaptability. The pulse of the sea-ocean currents in a shifting world. In the Cambrian, the Earth spun a little faster, and its oceans, though familiar in their form, were orchestrated by different rules. Tectonic reshaping had altered coastlines and seafloors, generating complex circulation systems. These ancient currents were the veins of the sea, carrying warmth, oxygen, and nutrients across the globe. Where warm waters flowed from equatorial zones to polar shelves, ecosystems flourished. Coral-like structures emerged in temperate zones, nurtured by these steady thermal streams. In other regions, cold upwellings brought nutrient-rich waters to the surface, fertilizing plankton blooms that fed trilobites, worms, and early arthropods. Currents acted as conveyors of life and shapers of destiny. Species distribution, reproductive cycles, and even evolutionary paths were aligned to the rhythm of water. Those who could swim or drift wisely prospered. Those who couldn't adapt were left behind. The currents, like the breath of the earth, offer a lesson in trust. Though invisible, they shape entire ecosystems. And in our lives, two unseen forces, love, memory, intuition, can guide us gently forward if we learn to move with their flow. Invisible architects, microbial life as the engineers of balance. Though trilobites and soft-bodied animals steal the show in Cambrian illustrations, the true stabilizers of the sea were far smaller. Microbial mats, colonies of cyanobacteria, archaea, and early eukaryotic microbes formed living carpets over the seafloor. These unseen engineers performed essential ecological roles. They oxygenated bottom waters through photosynthesis, even in shallow lagoons with limited circulation. They recycled organic matter, breaking down waste into usable nutrients. In their films and filaments, they stabilized sediments, preventing erosion and creating firm substrates for larger organisms to anchor. Many early reef systems began not with corals, but with microbial buildups, stromatolites and thrombolytes, that gradually accreted over millennia. These microbial structures housed tiny ecosystems within, offering protection and food to a variety of creatures. In healing, we often forget the power of the unseen. Microbes remind us that even the smallest presences can have profound impact. Balance is not just maintained by the mighty, but by the quiet constancy of those who work without recognition. The tides of nourishment, nutrient cycles, and ecosystem energy. Life thrives on nutrients, and the Cambrian Ocean was a tapestry of chemical exchange. Phosphorus, nitrogen, and trace metals were cycled by bacteria and sediment interactions. Volcanic ash, continental runoff, and hydrothermal vents contributed minerals that seeded productivity. When upwellings stirred the depths, they delivered oxygen and nutrients to surface waters, triggering massive blooms of phytoplankton. These microscopic plants formed the base of the food chain, capturing sunlight and fueling the Cambrian explosion from below. Each trophic level, from grazers to predators, relied on this continuous chemical flow. Decomposers played their part by breaking down the dead, ensuring nutrients returned to circulation. In essence, the sea was a living loop, each creature a node in a vast breathing system. We, too, are part of such cycles. In giving, receiving, and releasing, we remain in harmony with the world. The Cambrian Ocean teaches that thriving is not hoarding energy, but letting it move freely through the web of life. Shelters of sediment, mud, clay, and the foundation of communities. The Cambrian seafloor was not barren. It pulsed with life hidden in the mud. Fine sediments, silt, clay, and calcareous ooze accumulated in tranquil basins, creating soft grounds ideal for burrowers and sedentary feeders. Worms etched winding tunnels, aerating the seabed and mixing layers of nutrients. Filter feeders like brachiopods anchored themselves to hardened surfaces, while others nestled into soft sediment, waiting for food particles to drift by. These microhabitats offered refuge from predators and provided microclimates for niche evolution. Even excretions from burrowers added to the chemical diversity of the environment, subtly modifying it over time. Healing begins in such foundations. The quiet places we settle into, our rituals, our inner ground, are like ancient seabeds. They hold us, shape us, and allow us to become part of something stable yet ever-changing. Toward complexity, a stage set for future oceans. By the end of the Cambrian, the ocean had matured. Salinity gradients had become more stable, circulation systems more refined, and microbial balances more robust. These shifts laid the groundwork for future marine complexity. From Ordovician reef systems to the age of fish, tiny larvae began to disperse across currents, connecting distant populations. Food webs became more intricate, with specialized roles emerging among predators, scavengers, and filter feeders. Genetic innovations, fostered by diverse environments, accumulated slowly but steadily. The sea was no longer merely a habitat, it was a canvas of possibility. And so it is with healing. We begin with unstable chemistry, swirling emotion, and hidden currents. But over time, as layers build and flows align, we create ecosystems of inner calm and resilience. The Cambrian marine environment reminds us, every stable future is built on the poetry of change. Legacy of the Cambrian, complexity, fossils, and the rise of vertebrates. Let us carry the memory of these waters forward as we approach the final chapter. The legacy of the Cambrian lives not just in rock and fossil, but in the harmony it teaches, a harmony born from salt, current, and life too small to see. Part 6. The Cambrian Legacy. 1. The significance of the Cambrian explosion. The roots of modern animals when diversity took shape. In a brief moment on the geological timescale, merely around 20 million years, Earth witnessed a biological revolution. From ancient coral-like formations to mud-burrowing organisms, the Cambrian period marks the beginning of nearly all major animal lineages we know today. Main groups such as arthropods, mollusks, echinoderms, and even early precursors to vertebrates appeared almost simultaneously. This explosion of form, structure, and behavior was not gradual, but sudden and bold. Life had been simple for over 3 billion years: single cells, colonies, simple filaments, and then, in what seems like an evolutionary heartbeat, it became intricate. This moment is more than a point in paleontological history. It is a reminder that potential may rest quietly for eons before finally blooming. In the rush of our own lives, we may feel the pressure to evolve instantly. But the Cambrian teaches us that depth takes time, and sometimes the most enduring forms come after long stillness. The root systems of our modern biology, from the way we move, breathe, perceive, all began here. Just as plants reach into ancient soil, our animal story stretches back to this moment of radiant unfolding. Healing, too, can come from this recognition that complexity does not erase origin, it deepens it. A model of rapid evolution when nature chose speed. The Cambrian explosion wasn't merely a burst of new creatures. It was a transformation in how evolution could operate. For billions of years, natural selection had moved at a glacial pace, tinkering slowly with single-celled life. Then, in the Cambrian, something shifted. Evolution began to accelerate. This acceleration was not random. It was shaped by multiple converging factors. The rise in oxygen levels, the stabilization of climate, the emergence of predation, and, perhaps most profoundly, the invention of the genetic toolkit. Hox's genes, the master switches that direct body plans, became more active and complex. With just a few changes, these genes allowed organisms to grow limbs, eyes, spines, and shells. The canvas of life, once limited to soft-bodied drifters, became populated with armor-clad swimmers, burrowers, and climbers. This rapid diversification reveals evolution not as a slow inevitability, but as a process capable of dramatic leaps. It reminds us that growth is not always linear. Just as an idea may lie dormant for years before flowering overnight, life itself can reach new thresholds when the conditions align. In times of personal stagnation, we often forget that breakthrough may be one shift away, in mindset, in environment, in connection. The Cambrian tells us, do not underestimate the quiet preparation that precedes transformation. The rise of complex ecosystems, threads in a living web. Before the Cambrian, life was sparse and scattered, microbial mats, a few soft-bodied organisms, and the occasional multicellular colony. But with the explosion of animal forms came something equally remarkable: the emergence of complex ecosystems. For the first time, food webs became layered and dynamic. There were grazers, filter feeders, predators, and decomposers, each occupying specific roles, each relying on the others. Habitats diversified into shallow lagoons, reef-like mounds, and deep muddy basins. Relationships between species, symbiotic, competitive, parasitic, flourished. This web of interaction formed the architecture of modern ecosystems. It wasn't just about who ate whom, but about how energy moved, how niches were filled, how balance was maintained. The Cambrian was the rehearsal for every rainforest, coral reef, and grassland to come. And within that web, life found a rhythm not just to survive but to coexist. Healing in this context is learning how to belong in a system, to find your place not by overpowering others, but by becoming a needed thread in a greater fabric. The Cambrian teaches us that thriving comes from connection, that beauty grows at the intersection of diversity and interdependence, a threshold moment when simplicity yielded to complexity. If the history of life were a symphony, the Cambrian explosion was the crescendo, the instant when scattered notes became a melody. Simplicity gave way to complexity, and from the silence of the deep, life began to sing. This transition wasn't just morphological. It marked a philosophical shift in the Earth's story. For the first time, systems emerged that were greater than the sum of their parts. Neural networks sparked primitive sensation. Digestive tracts allowed internal processing. Shells and spines enabled defense and movement. Life began to engineer its own environments, creating burrows, altering sediment, even affecting ocean chemistry. The Earth was no longer just a passive host. It was being reshaped by its own guests. This is a reminder that transformation is both inward and outward. Just as organisms change their environment, so too do we alter the spaces we inhabit, homes, communities, even relationships. To heal is to participate in this reciprocity, to change and be changed. The Cambrian was a doorway, and once crossed, life never looked the same again. The memory of bones, fossils as echoes of becoming. One of the gifts the Cambrian left behind is a stunning fossil record. Trilobites, Hallucigenia, Morella, preserved in shale like pressed flowers of ancient oceans. These fossils are not just remains. They are memories etched in stone. The rise of hard body parts, shells, exoskeletons, mineralized spines, meant that life could now leave a record of its presence. And through these records, we glimpse not only the structure of life, but its emotion. The curl of a creature at death, the pathways of burrows, the swirl of an ancient sea. They whisper to us across deep time. We were here, we tried, we lived. Fossils teach us to listen, to our own traces, to what we leave behind in others. Healing is also legacy. It's not just about surviving the present, but shaping a past that future hearts can hold. The Cambrian gave us the first real story of life, told in mineral and silence. It invites us to write our own story, mindfully, beautifully, enduringly. The foundation of all to come, a legacy still unfolding. Though the Cambrian ended over 485 million years ago, its legacy endures in every heartbeat, every breath, every spine and limb. It is the soil from which all animal life has grown. What followed, the rise of vertebrates, the conquest of land, the dance of birds and mammals, would not have been possible without the Cambrian's architecture of life. It built the scaffolding upon which future evolution would climb. And it still whispers in our biology, our segmented nerves, our bilateral symmetry, our eyes, all echo that primeval burst of creativity. To reflect on the Cambrian is to remember our place in the greater narrative of being. It is to find peace in origin and hope in continuity. So as we close this chapter, let the sea of long ago ripple gently through your thoughts. Let it quiet your restlessness. Let it remind you, growth is not a race, but a rising tide, and you are part of its rhythm. The fossils that speak, exploring the geological and cultural legacy of the Cambrian record. 2 Cambrian fossils, voices from stone. Geological significance, the Earth's earliest chronicle. In the ancient rock layers of our planet, the Cambrian stands as one of the clearest and most vivid markers of life's awakening. It is not only a biological turning point, but a geological monument, a boundary where life left undeniable footprints in stone. Before the Cambrian, the fossil record is sparse and often ambiguous. Most life forms were soft-bodied and ephemeral, leaving little trace in the sediments. But during the Cambrian, for the first time in Earth's long memory, evolution sculpted hard shells, spines, plates, and teeth, structures that could withstand the passage of time and be preserved in rock. These fossilized remains turned the Earth into a living archive. From cliffs in Wales to the outcrops of Newfoundland, from the mountains of China to the deserts of Australia, Cambrian strata speak in the language of limestone and shale. Each layer is a page in a silent book, etched by pressure, heat, and millennia. These layers are more than just rock. They are calendars of catastrophe and calm, maps of ancient oceans, and a mirror reflecting the earliest whispers of complexity. The geological importance of the Cambrian is not simply in its content, but in its clarity, a rare moment where time, life, and environment intersected in harmony to preserve history in exquisite detail. Signature sediments, the fabric of a forgotten sea. The sediments of the Cambrian are as diverse as the creatures they preserve. Shales, sandstones, and limestones dominate the scene, each formed in distinct environments. Muddy seafloors, ancient reefs, and storm-washed shelves. These sediments became time capsules, holding not just fossils, but stories of tides, climates, and chemistry. Perhaps the most famous of these is the Burgess Shale in Canada, a black, flaky rock that captured life in soft silhouette. Here, delicate organisms that would have dissolved in most other conditions were preserved in extraordinary detail. Muscles, eyes, digestive tracts, even the whisper-thin filaments of gills are fossilized as shadows of carbon. Similar shale deposits have been discovered in Changjiang, China, and Sirius Posset, Greenland, forming what paleontologists call Lagerstätten, sites of exceptional fossil preservation. These layers are not only scientifically rich but spiritually evocative. They remind us that even the most fleeting forms of life can be remembered when the conditions are right. Sediments like these are not merely geological. They are emotional. They allow us to hold time in our hands, to see the impression of a creature that lived 500 million years ago, and to wonder how much of what we are is made of memory, pressed quietly beneath the layers of our own becoming. Fossil hotspots, portals into the Cambrian past. Throughout the world, Cambrian fossil sites act as windows through which we peer into a forgotten age. Each site is unique, offering a different lens on the explosion of life. Some, like the Burgess Shale, are rich in soft-bodied creatures, while others, such as the Emu Bay Shale in Australia or the Kylie Formation in China, reveal trilobites in their multitudes. These fossil beds are often located in remote, windswept places, high cliffs, dusty plateaus, ancient seabeds lifted by tectonic movement. The act of finding a fossil there is not just scientific. It is meditative. To kneel before a stone, to brush away the dust, to uncover a creature untouched for eons. This is communion with time itself. These sites have become pilgrimage grounds for paleontologists and dreamers alike. To walk among them is to walk through the pages of life's earliest chapters. Each fossil, no matter how small, is a relic of resilience, a message in a bottle from the past, reminding us of the durability of life and the tenderness of form. These are not just discoveries. They are gifts. Through them, Earth speaks softly of what once was, and we, for a moment, are invited to listen. Diversity in stone, an ancient menagerie. The variety of Cambrian fossils is staggering. Trilobites, with their ridged bodies and crystalline eyes, marched across the seafloor. Hallucigenia stood on spiky legs, its body like a dream-given shape. Morella fluttered like sea butterflies, and Opabinia peered through 5 eyes with a curious proboscis. These fossils reveal not only form but function, how these animals moved, fed, sensed, and protected themselves. Some bore protective spines, others had filter-feeding limbs, still others developed complex sensory organs. Each adaptation is a story of innovation, shaped by necessity and chance. This fossilized zoo shows us the courage of creation. Life did not proceed in straight lines. It meandered, doubled back, and tried strange, beautiful forms. Many of these creatures vanished, but in their boldness, they laid the groundwork for everything that followed. To view them is to glimpse nature's raw imagination. They remind us that creativity is not always elegant. Sometimes it is wild, awkward, and unexpected, but always essential. Healing, too, often requires that we experiment, take risks, and honor the strange parts of ourselves that may someday become our strength. Fossils as timekeepers, measuring more than just years. Fossils are not just remnants. They are records. Each layer of Cambrian rock is a timestamp, anchoring life within the story of the Earth. Through radiometric dating and stratigraphy, scientists can reconstruct sequences of change, who lived when and what the world looked like. But fossils also measure something softer: emergence, extinction, transition. They chart the pulse of life, not in seconds, but in epochs. They allow us to see the quiet momentum of adaptation, the rise and fall of entire lineages. In this, fossils become more than scientific tools. They are emotional instruments. They help us track not only what has been lost, but also what endured. And in our own lives, as we traverse personal layers of grief, joy, growth, and rest, fossils remind us that transformation is not linear, but layered. In holding a fossil, we hold a moment of stillness that echoes through time. We are reminded that even in silence, even in stillness, there is value, and that our presence, too, might one day become a quiet note in a much larger song. Legacy in stone, writing life's first chapters. The Cambrian fossil record is not just a scientific curiosity. It is the prologue of life's grand narrative. These ancient remains are the first time life said clearly, "I am here," and in doing so, they began the tradition of remembrance. Our own bones are echoes of this declaration. Our eyes, nerves, and spines are continuations of Cambrian blueprints. When we study these fossils, we are not merely looking back. We are looking inward, tracing the lineage that runs through every living thing. In this way, fossils are meditations. They bring stillness, perspective, and gratitude. They invite us to imagine a world before our own, and to see ourselves not as separate from history, but shaped by it. Each fossil is a reminder that to exist is to leave a trace, sometimes in stone, sometimes in love, sometimes in the quiet space we hold for another. So, as we close this chapter on Cambrian fossils, let us do so not with finality, but with reverence. For in every fossil lies a whisper of courage, of adaptation, of time unfolding, and a soft invitation to carry the story forward. The foundation for the Ordovician world, how Cambrian legacies sparked new frontiers of life. 3. Laying the groundwork for the Ordovician. Carriers of continuity, life that did not end with Cambrian time. As the curtains of the Cambrian period began to fall, the story of life was far from over. Rather, it was preparing for its next act. Many of the organisms that first appeared during the Cambrian didn't simply vanish with the changing tides. They evolved, transformed, and passed the torch forward. These creatures, though ancient, became architects of the Ordovician world. Trilobites, for example, continued to diversify beyond the Cambrian. Their shapes became more specialized, their eyes more refined, their exoskeletons adapted to new pressures. Brachiopods, often overshadowed by more flamboyant creatures, quietly thrived and spread. Some lineages of sponges and cnidarians persisted as steady cornerstones of benthic communities. More importantly, it was during this transition that early mollusks and arthropods experimented with new forms. The groundwork laid in Cambrian seas, from muscle structures to jointed limbs, allowed for exploration of niches previously untouched. Life began to push into deeper waters, complex reefs, and more interactive food chains. The end of the Cambrian was not a full stop. It was a comma, a pause before a new sentence. And those who carried on held the memory of that primordial bloom in their bones and shells, ensuring that the song of life would continue with greater complexity in the chapters ahead, strengthening the web, a more resilient food chain. In Cambrian waters, food chains were relatively simple but already groundbreaking. Predators like Anomalocaris stalked prey, scavengers like trilobites roamed the seafloor, and filter feeders like brachiopods and sponges processed the ocean's microbial haze. But by the end of the Cambrian, something was shifting. These roles were becoming more layered, more interdependent, and more sophisticated. Tiny planktonic organisms, the unseen heroes of ocean ecology, began to play a greater role. They fed not just small filter feeders, but became the base of an expanding pyramid. As species diversified, so did their diets. Herbivory became more common. Grazers adapted to scrape algae from seafloors and rocks. Predation evolved into a more refined art. Not just brute force, but strategy, speed, and specialized tools. Even decomposition, often overlooked, became more dynamic. Bottom-dwelling microbes flourished in the sediments, recycling nutrients and forming the foundation of a regenerative cycle. With each adaptation, the web of life became thicker and more elastic, capable of withstanding ecological shocks. What emerged was a food web not just built for consumption, but for balance. This was the beginning of a shift from mere survival to sustained ecosystems. Life was learning not just how to feed, but how to thrive together. And it was this very tapestry that the Ordovician world would inherit, expand, and enrich. The whisper of a backbone, the rise of the first vertebrates. Amid the great noise of invertebrate innovation, a quieter revolution was taking place, one that would redefine the arc of animal evolution. Somewhere in the shadowed reefs or murky tidal flats of the late Cambrian, the first vertebrates made their tentative appearance. These early vertebrates, like Miloconmingia and Haecuichthys, were small, soft-bodied fish-like creatures. They lacked jaws, bones, and fins as we know them today, but they possessed something profound: a notochord, a stiffened rod of tissue running along their back, a primitive spine. It was a whisper of what would one day become the backbone. This innovation gave them structure, flexibility, and the potential for more efficient movement. It also opened the door to greater body sizes and more complex anatomies. For the first time, an internal scaffold began to support the growing ambitions of life. These creatures were few and fragile. Most were lost to time, but their presence in the fossil record is a promise that evolution remembers its first sparks. From these humble swimmers would arise fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, each echoing the delicate strength first tested in Cambrian seas. Seeding complexity from simplicity to system, Cambrian life forms were already marvels of innovation, but they were, in many ways, still operating as individuals or simple colonies. With the end of the period, we begin to see hints of more complex biological systems taking shape. Organisms started to specialize internally. Digestive systems became more efficient. Neural nets gave way to clustered ganglia and primitive brains. Circulatory systems emerged that allowed for more effective oxygen and nutrient distribution. These developments weren't just anatomical upgrades. They were the infrastructure of a coming revolution. To survive in new and changing environments, life needed to organize itself better, internally and within communities. Behavior became more coordinated. Reproduction diversified. Developmental genes laid blueprints not only for growth, but for differentiation. The Cambrian explosion may have unveiled the shapes of life, but it was in its closing stages that the systems behind those shapes began to flourish. Complexity was no longer accidental. It was directional. The Ordovician, just on the horizon, would be the proving ground for these internal architectures of being. The pulse of reefs and shelves, building the habitats of tomorrow. One of the quiet revolutions of the Cambrian was the construction of habitats. Early in the period, most life clung to soft seafloors or floated passively in the water column. But by its end, organisms were beginning to engineer their environments. Primitive reef systems emerged, built not by corals but by sponges, algae, and microbial mats. These structures created refuges, hunting grounds, and complex vertical spaces. Life was no longer just adapting to its environment, it was starting to shape it. Continental shelves became hotbeds of biodiversity. As sea levels rose and tectonics shifted, new shallow seas appeared, bathing continental margins in warmth and nutrients. These zones supported intricate ecosystems that foreshadowed the Ordovician's marine richness. The construction of habitats is a kind of generosity. It makes room for others. It creates the conditions for collaboration, competition, and innovation. In the healing of our own lives, we too can become habitat builders, cultivating spaces, relationships, and rhythms where growth can happen. A prelude to the symphony, the Cambrian legacy unfolds. The Cambrian did not end in silence. Its legacy stretched like a bridge into the Ordovician, laying down the first stones of what would become a far grander cathedral of life. The patterns established, adaptation, diversification, interdependence, became foundational laws. As the Ordovician dawned, life expanded not just in form but in finesse. Marine ecosystems grew in depth and detail. Vertebrates slowly began to take root. Algae and early plants reached toward shallows and light. Predators sharpened their tools. Prey honed their defenses. The conversation of life became more elaborate. And yet, within all this change, the echo of the Cambrian remained. As fossils continued to whisper, as creatures became ancestors, its rhythms, though softened by time, pulsed in every branch that followed. To understand the Cambrian is to understand how life first learned to express itself loudly. To follow its legacy into the Ordovician is to witness how that expression deepened, matured, and harmonized. The song of life was still being written, but thanks to the Cambrian, it now had its first melody. Part 7. A soft crescendo summary of the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian explosion is not simply a historical event. It is the moment life found its courage. When the whispers of single-celled existence gave way to symphonies of movement, sensation, and structure, Earth became more than a rock orbiting a sun. It became a canvas, painted in living hues. Over 500 million years ago, the world was submerged in shallow seas, warm, nutrient-rich waters that cradled Earth's earliest dreams. In this womb of time, evolution stirred with new intention. For the first time, the tree of life sprouted thick branches, bursting with variety and invention. Nearly every major animal group we know today, from arthropods to mollusks, from worms to early chordates, can trace their roots to this single chapter. Prior to the Cambrian, most life was soft and simple. Creatures left few traces, and ecosystems moved in slow rhythms. But then, something changed. Genetic machinery began to favor complexity. Hard shells evolved not just to protect but to define. Eyes developed not just to react but to perceive. Mouths formed to bite, bodies segmented to specialize. With each innovation, life became braver, more expressive, more entangled with its surroundings. The seas filled with trilobites crawling in armor, with spiny hallucinogens walking upside down, with Morella fluttering through underwater dusk. The first predators stalked, the first prey hid. Burrows and footprints marked the sediment. The ocean floor became a page, and life began to write. These changes were not just biological, they were ecological, chemical, even spiritual. Energy flowed through new channels. Death gave way to recycling. Competition gave birth to strategy. Communities emerged. The web of life, fragile and brilliant, stretched wider and deeper than ever before. And underneath it all, geology bore witness. In places like the Burgess Shale of Canada and Chengjiang of China, soft-bodied fossils were preserved with stunning detail, offering us a rare window into this turning point. These rocks are more than sediment. They are memory. They hold the shape of creatures long gone, but not forgotten. In their presence, we remember that everything leaves a trace. In stone, in soil, in silence. Why did this burst of diversity happen? Perhaps it was the rise in oxygen levels or the chemistry of the oceans. Perhaps it was ecological arms races or genetic breakthroughs like Hox genes guiding body plans. Most likely it was all of these and something more. Confluence, a ripening, a readiness. The Cambrian reminds us that transformation doesn't always come suddenly, but when it does, it can be radiant. This period gave life new tools, but also new ways to relate, to see, to hunt, to flee, to build, to belong. It wasn't just a period of diversification. It was a declaration. I am here and I am many. And though most Cambrian creatures are now extinct, they are not irrelevant. Their forms became blueprints. Their eyes became our eyes. Their bones, their nerves, their instincts still echo through the animal kingdom, including in us. We carry their courage. In our modern world, so full of speed and distraction, the Cambrian offers a gentle lesson that from quiet beginnings, beauty can surge. That change, when nurtured, can blossom into endless forms most beautiful. And that deep time is not cold and distant. It is alive in every breath we take, every sense we possess. To learn the story of the Cambrian is to learn the art of emergence, of finding shape in the formless, of daring to be complex, of building not just to survive but to sing. And now, as the Cambrian curtain slowly falls, the stage does not go dark. Instead, it opens wider. In the next act, the Ordovician world rises, with new oceans, new forests not yet formed, and life ready to reach higher still. Stay with the current. The song continues. Evolutionary lessons. In the quiet sanctuary of the night, when the world slows to a whisper and your breath begins to soften, it's natural to feel the weight of the day settling upon you. The pressures from work, the tangled threads of family expectations, the complicated dance of friendships, and the relentless hum of society's demands. All may swirl like a storm inside your chest. Yet, in this stillness, beneath the noise and the rush, there lies a deeper rhythm, a timeless heartbeat that has guided life on Earth through eons and upheavals. This ancient pulse, steady and sure, carries a message of patience, resilience, and gentle growth. From the very first flickers of life billions of years ago, existence has been a story of transformation. Creatures small and simple learned to adapt to shifting tides, changing climates, and unexpected challenges. They did not rush their progress. Instead, they moved slowly, step by step, learning to survive through calm persistence rather than force. The earth itself breathes in long, measured cycles. Inhale, exhale, a rhythm that echoes through mountains, oceans, and all living beings. And so, dear soul, your journey is part of this vast, unfolding story, and your own breath, your own rhythms, are not separate but deeply connected. It is easy to forget in our fast-paced lives that healing and growth do not demand sudden leaps or dramatic transformations. Just as the ancient trilobites, armored but delicate, moved carefully across the Cambrian seafloor, you too can move gently through your own life's challenges. These creatures teach us that significance is not about speed or power, but presence. Each small step, each quiet moment of awareness, holds the power to reshape your path. There is no need to hurry. Rest in the unfolding process. Healing is a soft tide, not a crashing wave. Within this great evolutionary tale, one of the most profound lessons is the power of connection. The earliest life forms may have been solitary, but soon they discovered strength in cooperation. Cells joined hands, forming the first multicellular beings. Ecosystems emerged from tangled webs of interaction, where every organism had a role, every voice mattered. Likewise, in your life, when the world feels isolating and heavy, remember that you are woven into a rich community of souls. Healing often blooms in the warmth of relationships, in shared smiles, quiet support, and the simple presence of another. Like ancient coral reefs built by countless tiny architects, your bonds create a sanctuary where growth and safety can flourish. Life flows in cycles: birth and death, growth and rest, emergence and fading. The Cambrian explosion, a brilliant burst of biodiversity, was followed by new chapters of adaptation and renewal. These natural rhythms offer you a gentle reminder. Endings are not final, but transitions, soft invitations to begin anew. When weariness creeps in, or when pain feels overwhelming, allow yourself to embrace the natural flow of time. Rest deeply as the earth rests beneath winter's quiet snow, knowing that with patience, renewal will come like the dawn's first light. This trust in the cycle is a balm for the soul, a sacred dance between surrender and hope. The complexity that blossomed in the Cambrian seas was both overwhelming and beautiful. Thousands of species, each unique, formed intricate webs of life that balanced chaos with harmony. Your own inner world may feel similarly complex, an ocean of emotions, thoughts, and memories moving in currents and tides. Instead of resisting this rich inner landscape, let it be a source of creativity and strength. Embrace the fullness of your being, the light and shadow alike. Just as nature embraces diversity as a key to survival, so can you find wholeness by accepting every part of yourself. Healing grows where acceptance lives. One of the tenderest lessons from the ancient world is the gift of presence. The trilobites' crystalline eyes remind us that seeing clearly, both outward and inward, is a form of safety. To pause, to observe with gentle attention before rushing into action, cultivates wisdom and calm. In your daily life, practice this art of presence. Slow your breath and tune in to the small miracles around you. The soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze, the steady beating of your own heart, the quiet hum of life continuing beyond your worries. These moments ground you like the roots of an ancient tree, anchoring your spirit through the storms. In moments of quiet reflection, you may find that your struggles echo the resilience of the earliest life forms. Just as life adapted gradually through soft, repeated changes, so too can you find healing through small, mindful steps. Transformation does not need to be dramatic or immediate. It grows in the gentle unfolding of time. Be patient with yourself. Allow your heart to open slowly, like a flower turning toward the sun. Your journey is unique and precious, and it deserves kindness and grace. As the night deepens, Imagine the ancient seas where life first blossomed, quiet waters shimmering under a gentle moon, tiny creatures moving in harmonious dance. Their story is your story, whispered through the ages. Let their enduring spirit fill you with calm and courage. You are part of a great, unfolding symphony, playing a role that no one else can. Rest now in the knowledge that you carry the strength of those who came before, the wisdom of the earth itself, and the gentle light of hope. Sleep softly, dear one. Let the rhythms of evolution soothe your mind and heal your heart. Tomorrow is a new day, a fresh wave in the eternal tide of life's unfolding. And through it all, remember, you are never alone. You are part of this vast, beautiful story. Slow, steady, and always moving forward. In the gentle unfolding of Earth's grand story, the Ordovician period stands as a luminous dawn, a time when life's melodies grew richer, deeper, and more complex. As we drift back nearly 485 million years, imagine a world both strange and wondrous, where seas brimmed with early fish and fragile plants stretched their green fingers toward the sun for the very first time. You have walked beside ancient waves tonight, through oceans where trilobites once marched in silent grace, where soft-bodied dreams left their whispers in stone. You have listened to the song of Earth's first courage, felt the breath of evolution stir beneath primordial waters. Now, let that quiet knowledge wrap around you like a blanket woven in starlight and memory. The Cambrian world, full of shimmer and change, is not as far as it seems. It hums beneath your feet, in every drop of water, in the rhythm of your heart. All the life that danced in those long-lost tides, the shell-bearers, the first seers, the ancient architects of motion and form, they still speak. Not with words, but with presence, with legacy. You are part of this story. The warmth in your chest, the awareness behind your eyes, these are gifts from lives long past, from soft-bodied ancestors who dared to become something more, from oceans that taught life how to feel, to move, to endure. So now, as the world around you slows, let yourself follow the same rhythm. Breathe in gently, as the Cambrian seas once did, drawing in the new oxygen of a changing sky. Breathe out slowly, like the ripple of marine algae swaying in the shallows, unhurried and at peace. You are safe here. No storm in your day, no weight in your heart, can reach this soft shoreline of memory. The past does not demand anything from you. It only offers perspective and a hand to hold through the darkness. If today has felt too loud, if the world has asked too much of your strength, your patience, your smile, let the earth's earliest whispers remind you, growth is slow. Healing is not loud. Life unfolds in layers, each one more beautiful than the last. In the Cambrian, complexity was not a race, but a gentle blossoming. Creatures did not rush to become what they were. They tried, they stumbled, they changed, and still they endured. They left fossils not just in stone, but in the very blueprints of what life would become. And in that story, there is room for your own. So when the mind spirals and the body tenses, return here to a time when everything was new, when the earth was not in a hurry. Float weightlessly in those soft waters. Picture the trilobite beneath you, gently navigating the ocean floor. Let the currents hold you. Let the darkness be kind. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to begin again tomorrow. Sleep is not an ending. It is a return to quiet oceans, to ancient rhythms, to the soft song of becoming. You are not alone in this night. The entire history of life cradles you like a lullaby too vast for words. So breathe again. Feel your body grow heavier with calm. Feel your mind slow like the settling silt of the Cambrian seafloor. Let your heartbeat become the pulse of the planet. And if this story has soothed you, even just a little, know that there are more waiting, more chapters, more wonders, more gentle songs of earth waiting to be heard in the quiet of night. Consider joining our sleepy community. Subscribe to Sleepy History, where each bedtime is a journey through deep time, where the evolution of Earth becomes the melody that carries you home. Thank you for spending this moment with us. Let go now. Let the oceans of old rock you to sleep. Let the stars above the Cambrian seas blink softly over your dreams. And may you wake with quiet strength, knowing that you, too, are a miracle of time. Good night, dear soul. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. The story continues.